Chapter 1330. The Anonymous Evil Thing. Chapter 1330. The Anonymous Evil Thing, _ Something alerted Shi Yin immediately. He hugged Xia Xian and left the area, his face as cold as ice. Sizzle. Sizzle. Spark's veins and intestines were like smart and agile snakes, aiming at Shi Yin to coil him. At the same time, a cold and evil aura came together with those snake-like intestines and blood veins. Unexpectedly, it seeped into Shi Yan's sea of consciousness and slowed down his soul altar. That cold and evil aura was like the soul consciousness of a terrifying soul that was able to affect and confine the warrior's soul. Boom! A strong blow suddenly hit his chest. Shi Yin couldn't believe it, and he looked at Xia Xian. Xia Xian wore a numb face. She seemed to have gotten possessed. She was now a puppet that didn't have control over her body. Her cold eyes didn't sparkle with human emotions anymore. They were cold and sharp like ice. She had just attacked Shi Yin at his chest and gotten rid of his embrace. After she got loose from him, she didn't attack Shi Yin more. She indifferently moved towards a hovering cloud not far from her. That cloud was empty, and it opened like an evil mouth waiting for food to come. Not good. Shi Yan's eyes became rough. He didn't need to think to know that Xia Xian was controlled by that evil force. Her soul was confined now. Sizzle. 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 The veins and intestines from Spark's body became like evil snakes or demons' tongues. They were swift and agile with auras that could enchant the soul. They came like lightning. Swoosh. 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 Shortly after, the burning flames flew out from Shi Yan's body and turned into a seething fire sea. The aura of the heaven flames was released, and it filled the area. The veins and intestines sizzled inside the heaven flames. They immediately retreated into Spark's chest. The last bit of life on Spark's face disappeared. He was now filled with a dead aura. With heaven flames moving around, Shi Yin became a burning man and he shot out. He flashed and then appeared by Xia Xian, extending his hand to catch her. Blurp, blurp, blurp. All of a sudden, strange noises arose from the clouds around him. Those noises sounded like some liquid boiling, a gushing stream, or something gulping. Swish, swish. The beams of some mucus, gray substance like saliva drooling from the stinky mouth of some beast suddenly shot out from the dark clouds. All of them had the same target. Shi Yin. Shi Yin sneered. His god power burst out and made the sea of fire on his body fiercer. A dark red fire came with Shi Yan's soul consciousness detached from the sea of fire and moved quickly towards Xia Xian. Xia Xian had a numb face before she was shrouded inside the flame. When the scorching flame covered her, its aura switched from burning to freezing. This switching was smooth and magical indeed. A cold current directly seeped into her brain and released an extremely cold but clear aura that cleaned her soul altar. Her beautiful eyes resumed lucid. Her face changed when she pressed her two thumbs on her eyes. A strange ability of time was urged. The miraculous replay appeared. It seemed like she had recovered her condition to the time before she was possessed by the evil energy. In her eyes, after her time had flown backward, the unknown aura that had invaded her had disappeared. The time power Upanishad was so magical and inexplicable. A warrior who cultivated it to a profound level could stay in his prime condition forever by locking his time. After Xia Xian recovered, her eyes became so cold. She looked at the clusters of dark clouds around and whispered, "Be careful. Something evil is here." Right at this moment, more sticky fluid fell into the sea of fire that Shi Yin had created. Strangely, those beams of thick fluid weren't burned or evaporated. They could survive in his sea of fire made of the heaven flames. Although they smoked, they still persistently went towards his body. Shi Yin was a little shocked. Since he was blended into this world, he hadn't seen many things that could survive heaven flames. He couldn't believe that this sort of anonymous, sticky substance was so frightening. Extinguish. He placed one finger on the glabella. The soul altar released the dazzling heaven flame again, but fiercer this time. After another fusion, Shi Yin now had 4 types of heaven flames to use. He had just released one of them. A new flow of heaven flame came with fine electric beams and lightning bolts, and even the aura that could erode the soul. It was the combined flame of the world-extinguishing thunder flame, the 9 serenity soul-devouring flame, and the ice-cold flame. This heaven flame had dancing lightning and a soul-devouring aura that boosted its power to the acme. The mucus substance couldn't resist it. However, it wasn't melted down. All beams of this evil, sticky thing immediately got rid of the sea of fire and returned to the dark clouds. It's possible that one of those clouds has captured Ziyao. Xia Xin Yin dashed forward and stood by Shi Yin. Her face was cold and her eyes were worried. At the false immortal realm, Spark was trapped inside the dark cloud. If Ziyao was confined, it was hard to say if she could endure until now. I'm going to send more fire. Pondering, Shi Yin released the combined flame of the immemorial demonic flame, the Yin spirit ghost flame, and the corpse vanishing flame. He had boosted the power of the flame around him to be several times higher. With Shi Yin as the center, the sea of fire expanded rapidly. The top yang, hot flame turned into flows that covered the dark clouds around and attempted to burn them into ashes. I don't care who or what you are. I just want you to give me the girl wearing purple clothes. As long as she's all right, I won't burn you down. I will leave you in peace here. Shi Yin closed his eyes and mouth, releasing his soul consciousness like the storm in the sea of fire. He sent wisps of soul consciousness in every direction. Shi Yin believed that as long as it was some high-level creature with a soul, it could receive his wisp of soul consciousness and understand him. This time, Ziyao was missing, and it was a big possibility that those jet-black clouds had captured her. Shi Yin didn't know if Ziyao was still alive. If he risked everything to defeat the enemy, there was a chance that Ziyao wouldn't survive even if he won. Thus, the first thing he had to do was to ensure that Ziyao could survive. That's why he decided to use the soul to communicate. Unfortunately, his soul message couldn't achieve the desired effect. In fact, there was no response. Those clusters of clouds were like dead things or objects that didn't have a consciousness. They were there, still. Shi Yin didn't receive a reply. Shi Yin wore a dark and cold face. He lowered his voice. Then don't blame me for destroying this place entirely. Boom, boom, boom. Just like a bursting flood, heaven flames rumbled inside the sea of fire. The fire flew out and hit the clouds and the warriors covered inside precisely like the meteorites. Apparently, those warriors were dead. There was no bit of vitality in their bodies. However, Shi Yin had a feeling that they still had a flow of consciousness that was scattered like the wisps of the thunder dragon's soul in the star area barrier. However, the difference here was that Lei Di's scattered soul didn't have consciousness. It had only memories and a pure aura. After all the wisps were reunited, Lei Di was revived and had regained his consciousness and cognition. However, the flow of consciousness in those warriors' bodies seemed to be able to survive individually. It was like Ming Hao's soul control power Upanishad that could make each wisp of his soul a clone of his. That's how they had many Ming Haos in different star areas. The consciousness that Shi Yin could feel in those clouds was similar to Ming Hao's condition. Explode them! Shi Yin shouted. The scorching flames swarmed over and attacked a big cloud. The impact was so earth-shaking. Just like the constant explosions not far from them, the explosion from this impact had created holes in the void like an entrance leading to other areas. However, the explosion and the heat from the heaven flames couldn't burn and extinguish the ink-like clouds. They weren't affected. They just shrank a little bit. The strange rain still fell and connected the sky and the underworld. However, at this moment, it suddenly became fiercer. The sprinkle had become a downpour. In this area of chaotic space currents, this kind of rain shouldn't happen. However, it occurred now. The raindrops were like a demon's tears with an extremely strong piercing power. They came like falling daggers. Shi Yin's face changed again. The evil and peculiar features of this area were over his imagination. He pondered for a few seconds. Billions of starlight beams radiated from his body. They turned into a light curtain or like a feather fan above Shi Yin and Xia Xin Yin. The shield created by the starlight had stopped the strange rain. However, it smoked as the star energy drained quickly. If we continue this way, you can't endure for a long time without energy supplement. You're just merely using energy without a refill, said Xiaoxian Yin. Shi Yin nodded. He knew she was right. Because they couldn't refill the consumed energy in this hour, their day of death was when their energy was all gone. Shi Yin couldn't absorb the energy in this area. He had thought that no creature could take in the remnant of energy inside the chaotic space basin. But when he found Ziyao could do that, he understood that nothing was absolute. Shi Yin believed that the one who was attacking them discreetly, the creature they didn't know yet, could gather the energy here for sure. If he fought that person here, he would lose eventually in a battle of attrition. We will have some solution, Shi Yin comforted her calmly. He quieted down his mind and released his soul consciousness to sense and survey. He wanted to use the soul consciousness to check if he could find Ziyao in the clouds around here. After that, he would think about how to rescue her. After a while, he screamed, his face panic-stricken. He suddenly looked in a direction where two powerful experts were approaching. He knew both of them. De Carlos and Lady. Why did they come here? What did they come here for? Chapter 1331. The Big Meatball. Chapter 1331. The Big Meatball _. The starlight curtain above their heads could resist the fierce downpour. Shi Yin put on a heaven countenance. He was surprised too. Xiaoxian Yin was sensitive enough to see the slightest change on his face and the scream. Did you find something? Someone is coming? Shi Yin had an idea. He released his soul consciousness and revealed his life energy fluctuation. He wanted to know if De Carlos and Lady came here on purpose. A wisp of soul consciousness flew out and flashed in the middle of the outer space streamers. He focused on observing. Indeed, they were heading here. Surprisingly, De Carlos and Lady came to this area together. When Shi Yin had released his soul consciousness, De Carlos and Lady looked surprised. They exchanged looks and frowned. Then, they turned into two beams of lightning and crossed the distance immediately. In the next moment, Lady and De Carlos had arrived by Shi Yin and Xiaoxian Yin. When the two-second sky of Immortal Realm experts saw Shi Yin, they had awkward expressions. Why are you here? De Carlos asked as he couldn't make head or tail out of it. Shi Yin had the same doubt. So why are you here? You're the one who gifted me that pure energy. At the same time, Xiaoxian Yin cried. Her beautiful eyes had a magical light. She looked at De Carlos and cried. We don't know each other. Why did you pour that amount of pure energy on me? Because you're cultivating time power, Upanishad. In this vast sea of stars, you're not the only expert cultivating this power, but you have the highest realm. De Carlos looked at her, his voice tender and happy. It seems like the evil barrier in your heart is clear. Yeah, it's really good. Now, you can continue to break through and progress faster. I quite don't understand your idea. For the time being, you don't need to understand it. Your realm is still a little low. When the time comes and your realm becomes sufficient, I will tell you the reason. Why are you here? De Carlos suddenly furrowed his brows and quieted down. Taking a deep breath, he looked at the clouds around and then Shi Yin and Xiaoxian Yin. He asked, How did you get here? Coincidence. Shi Yin rubbed his forehead. Pondering for a while, he thought he should tell them the truth. Perhaps they could provide him with more precise information. Thus, he told them the situation. A friend of mine came here unintentionally. I guess those clouds have captured her. I came here following her life energy fluctuations. Those aren't clouds, said Lady all of a sudden. De Carlos looked at him. Are they related to the ones of your heavenly monster tribe? Lady shook his head. Hesitating for a while, he turned to Shi Yin. You should ask him. I think he knows it better than I do. De Carlos' eyes brightened. He didn't pretend to go around the bush. Kid, do you feel anything familiar here? Did you sense the distinctive aura of the very first generation of heavenly monster tribe around here? Shi Yin observed the surroundings, including innumerable clouds and the strange downpour. He pried. You mean there is some creature living around here? Lady and De Carlos nodded. No, there's no aura of heavenly monster tribes precursors. Otherwise, I would have sensed it before. When I was in Thunder Firmament Star Area and saw the thunder wisps of a soul for the first time, I could feel the magical aura instantly. I didn't have such a feeling here, Yin said. Listening to him, Lady and DeCarlos went stern. After a while, DeCarlos said in a low-pitched voice, "We were wrong. It's not one of heavenly monster tribes' precursors. So, what is it? Isn't it a creature from our universe? What are you guys talking about?" Yin sounded bewildered. DeCarlos looked at him and hesitated. That thing always exists in this space basin. It has swallowed countless warriors who had fallen into this area accidentally. It's really bizarre. Its body seems to detach or divide into many pieces and scatter throughout the many death traps in this area. I've been living for so many years in the turbulent space basin. I've encountered its existence in many zones. It has a life consciousness. It can gather energy here. It can move, but it has never contacted any other creature. Talking about this strange creature, DeCarlos looked baffled and worried somehow. "If these aren't clouds, are they its body?" asked Yin. It was unknown why DeCarlos didn't treat Yin with care. He sounded a little harsh, though. However, when he talked to Yin, he was very gentle. He even paid attention to Yin's question. "The clouds are just the cover. Let me show you its real form. Take a look." DeCarlos made the hand seal. His 10 fingertips joined and sharp blades shot out, attacking one dark cloud. The sharp blades were like pairs of scissors that peeled the dark cloud as if someone was peeling off a tangerine. The cloud was paired, releasing wisps of smoke. All of a sudden, an ugly thing emerged nakedly. That thing was a gray-brown chunk with many small dots like snot from a runny nose or some soft maggots. Somehow, it looked more like sarcomas or meat lumps. This gross thing could even move. After a glance, Yin was filled with loathing. So disgusting. This area has more than dozens of thousands of clouds. Each cloud has a thing like that keeps the warriors inside. They are the ones who have come here accidentally. Those things have captured them and killed them slowly. Those clouds are ugly meatballs or malicious tumors. Sometimes they gather, but most of the time, they stay separate like this. I want to tell you one more thing. There are many areas with the same clusters of clouds like this in the chaotic space currents. I've seen a lot. However, with my cultivation base, I can't survey the ends of the current. I guess there will be more of these in the deeper and further area, DeCarlos explained. Yin and Yin were frightened. They were baffled and they couldn't say anything. This infinite chaotic space basin had many areas with this sort of creature that was like malignant tumors. No one knew how long they had been there and how many warriors of many eras they had swallowed. DeCarlos didn't know if it had a high intellect or not. It was because he had never talked to it. However, DeCarlos had a vague feeling that it did have intelligence and a complete consciousness. Thus, he thought the reason why it didn't want to communicate with him was that it disdained him. I have an absurd feeling. I feel like it disdains to talk to us because it assumes that we don't deserve it. It's like we don't talk to a bug because we're a high-level creature and a bug is just a lowly insect. There's a distance we can't cover, added DeCarlos. Absurd. Really absurd. I'm sure you're wrong. Even Lady couldn't stand it. He shook his head continuously, doubting DeCarlos's feeling. Except for you, who knows about its existence? Asked Yin. DeCarlos snorted. I don't know. As far as I know, no one else knows about it and is still alive. He, Frederick, and Tianxia have profound realms, but their territories are somewhere else. They are restricted a lot in this space basin. They can't stay here for a long time. So why are you here? What's your purpose? Yin asked again. He thinks it's a hidden danger. We can't talk to it, so we decided to destroy it. We will destroy each of the gathering spots he's found. We don't want to leave any seed of potential dangers. Different from his friend, Lady explained to Yin calmly and gently. Yin had revived him, and Yin had the origin of his homeland. From deep in his soul, he felt close to Yin instinctively. It was the soul streak that existed in his soul since he was born. He could never erase it. Destroy it here? Shi Yin grinned. Good thought. I have the same idea. It seems like we have the same voice here. You've tried. De Carlos frowned, his face severe. Although your realm's not high, you have the origin of the ancient continent. You have the heaven flames. I heard that heaven flames can refine any kind of creature. You've tried, but you didn't succeed? Lady's face darkened. Is it really hard to destroy this thing? Perhaps it's because I haven't fused with my heaven flame utterly. But it's really peculiar, indeed, nodded Shi Yin. De Carlos wore a stern face, his line of sight raking around. After a while, he talked to Shi Yin. Today, your bloodthirsty force and the God Clan are in furious war. You ignore your business and come here for what? Lady and I will solve the problem here. You should leave soon. Don't waste Xian He and Ming Hao's appreciation for you. A friend of mine has gone missing, Shi Yin snorted. Ah, because of a girl, haha. Kid, you have my style from before. Lady laughed and grumblingly shook the entire void. He cocked his head, looking at Xia Xian Yin and grinning. You got two beautiful ladies at the same time. Bold. Both Lady and Azure Dragon had the lustful blood of the Dragon Clan. Rumors said that the two ancestors of heavenly monster tribe Lady and Qing Xiao had turned their backs to each other because of women. Moreover, Elder Spark of the God Clan just died. Fiery Rain Star Area won the first victory. Of course, Xian He, Ming Hao, and Frederick have managed all the details of the bigger battles. I don't need to worry a lot, said Shi Yin indifferently. He knew his capacity. Before he had reached the immortal realm to be finally equal to Quan He and Ming Hao, the newly elected master of the bloodthirsty force was just a puppet. He could step on this throne because Xian He, Ming Hao, and Frederick thought that it would be easier and more legal for him to have the voice as the master. Unless Xian He, Ming Hao, and Frederick didn't mind Bloodthirsty's rules, they couldn't call all the warriors cultivating the 8 power Upanishads to launch the war against the God Clan. If you insist on staying, I will tell you more things. It's true that you can help us a little more. De Carlos pondered for a while and then nodded. Shi Yan's eyes brightened. Chapter 1332, Refine. Chapter 1332, Refine _ Actually, I've paid attention to it for a long time. I've secretly watched its moves. However, it recently became rebellious. As it captured more warriors, perhaps it's like a wounded warrior getting healed. De Carlos explained with a grave face. Recently, the space passages in the sea territory of many star areas often encounter problems. Many warriors have gone missing inexplicably while moving through the space passages. Furthermore, many people who were using the space teleport formation I've built have also gone missing. He looked at Xia Xian Yin and Shi Yin, his face heavier. I didn't have a clue until I found a missing warrior in a cloud near here. De Carlos pointed at the dark clouds around and spoke with a cold countenance. Those gone missing warriors were dragged here to this chaotic space basin. It has confined them. Shi Yin and Xia Xian Yin were shaken. They couldn't believe it, and they felt so cold inwardly. If that thing could affect space passages and pull traveling warriors to the space basin, the transport between the star areas was going to be much more dangerous later on. De Carlos was the warrior with the best space power Upanishad in the world. He had built many space teleport formations for Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. When those formations were ineffective and many warriors had disappeared mysteriously while using the formations, it was going to create a terrible influence on his reputation. He had to make it clear. If it happened that way, people would be afraid of traveling through space passages. It would affect the universe a lot. It's not that simple. De Carlos rubbed his long, white beard. He looked at the dark clouds hovering nearby and said with a little fear, it seems to affect the barrier of the sky too. You know that the normal warriors can't shatter the void with their attacks. But now, when third sky of incipient God realm experts fight, they can make the void shatter or break. They can possibly make the entire star area collapse. Shi Yin was surprised. He suddenly remembered the time he fought with Spark when his blood sword had hit the other's celestial ice jade flake, which had created a space that shattered. At that time, he suddenly had a feeling that the void seemed so vulnerable. It was too fragile. When the void collapsed that time, around 10,000 God Clan's warriors had been dragged into the space basin. He knew that they couldn't survive. Connecting this to what DeCarlos had just told him, Yin grimaced. He got a very bad premonition. Could it be that someone had done something discreetly to take that horde of God Clansmen to confine them like Spark? I took Lady here because I found that the sea territory has become even stranger. Recently, it seems to have much more energy, continued DeCarlos. Air. Yin rubbed his nose, feeling embarrassed. When I fought Spark, we had exploded the void of Fiery Rainstar area. Around 10,000 warriors of the God Clan had been dragged into this area. I wonder if that sudden boost of energy is related to the God Clan's warriors and Spark? Hearing him, Lady was bewildered. DeCarlos changed his face and thundered, I couldn't believe it was because of you. Don't be feverish. Don't. I'm here to find the solution, aren't I? Yin smiled sheepishly. DeCarlos, don't forget why we're here. It's more important to do the main business. Lady comforted him. This kid is our heavenly monster tribe's lucky star. If you kill him, our tribe won't thrive again. Harumph, I don't dare to kill him. Anyway, DeCarlos's face was glum, as if his parents had just passed away. He's a bad omen and a malignant tumor of this sea of stars. If he dies, this universe will be in peace. But now, no one wants to live in peace in this universe. I don't want to cause any grudge against Tian Xia, Ming Hao, or Xin He. Focus. Lady stressed it again. DeCarlos calmed down eventually. Right, focus on the business. I will peel off the dark things outside the meatball. You will use rough lightning to strike it, then we let the kid use the heaven flame to burn it down. Let's see if we can destroy it. He soon had a plan. I think it's not gonna be trouble. Lady laughed roughly and winked at Yin. Do you have any problem? Not at all, Yin shrugged. DeCarlos didn't linger. He took action directly and released his power. In this strange area, he made hand seals and skillfully drew the power of space. His body glowed and flashed continuously like a sparkling crystal. It happened like that for several seconds. Abruptly, billions of sharp blades bloomed like a storm. They scattered and slashed on those black clouds. Just like miracle sabers, they flew around and peeled off the outer layer of the black clouds. The disgusting meat lumps were revealed like massive tumors hanging in the sky and filling the area. There were more than 10,000 of them. Vaguely, they had formed a strange, unknown array. Those meatballs had a viscous substance like the nasal mucus. They swelled and moved closer to each other. Just like cells that were magnified billions of times, they gathered and made goosebumps rise on their skin. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Suddenly, lightning strikes came with the bellowing thunder. Billions of lightning snakes flew out of Lady's incipient extent and attacked those massive balls. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Innumerable meatballs began to fume gray smoke. They swelled and diffused more sticky fluid. There were so many warriors confined inside the meatballs. The blood veins and intestines acted like the tentacles that moved agilely toward Yin's team. Those things were sticky and disgusting with a sort of gross, yellow pus that was dripping. It was so nauseating indeed. At the same time, an evil thought aimed at them. Lady, could you feel that? DeCarlos suddenly screamed. Is that the consciousness a low-level creature could have? Lady winced. He knitted his brows to focus on sensing. Then, he said, You're right. It looks down on us and doesn't talk to us because it assumes that it's a high-level being and we're just little ants. Yeah, that feeling. As Yin and Xian Yin had relatively low realms, they couldn't feel the subtle features that Lady and DeCarlos could feel. They looked surprised as they were trying to sense too. Send out your heaven flame. Use the best power to burn down this area, shouted DeCarlos. He hadn't finished and the eternal fires hovering around Yin had already expanded like fire burning the dry moor. With one breath, the scorching flames of the origin had rolled fierily. Billions of flames shot toward the meatballs like lightning strikes. Boom, boom. The meat lumps caught on fire and started burning. At first, DeCarlos had peeled off the thickest defense of it. Then, Lei Di used his magnificent lightning to bombard it, and in the end, the heaven flames of the origin burned it. The three experts had joined hands, and they seemed to find the right way to destroy those gross things. Innumerable meat lumps were covered in heaven flame, burning fiercely. It seems that it's not really hard. Lei Di grinned and continued harshly. We don't need to care what the heck it is. Just burn it down. Let's see what it can do. De Carlos agreed with him. Because of the fiery power of Shi Yan's heaven flames that could burn all kinds of creatures, he began to treat Shi Yan better. Looking at the vehement flame expanding, he said, "Here's just one spot. Only the spots I know, there are around 10. We should keep going." "I want to find my friend," frowned Shi Yan. "The one you're searching for shouldn't be here. Otherwise, you won't burn them that easily. Before we came here, you must have investigated the area." De Carlos looked impatient. "First, for the safety of many star areas, we should head on to the main business. Perhaps the one who you're looking for is confined by the same thing but in another area. We should just check one by one then. It won't take much time anyway." "Hey, what's that?" screamed Lei Di. De Carlos and Shi Yan looked at that area. It was the meatball that kept spark. It was burned, but it didn't look like ashes. Quite the contrary, a cold energy was emitting from it. The cold energy created a blue mist, then diffused. Shi Yan's heaven flame was extinguished everywhere it went by. "It sparks life treasure. It's strange." He said that it was called Celestial Ice Jade Flake. He got it from the sea domain of Nihility, and he had to use 700 years to tame it. "It's really powerful, though." Shi Yan screamed as he saw the icy halo inside the meat lump. "Something from the sea domain of Nihility." De Carlos looked tense. "It can endure your heaven flame without reducing the cold energy, and it can use the mist to extinguish your premature heaven flame. This item is absolutely a magical treasure." Lei Di's eyes brightened. However, his interest was gone almost instantly, shaking his head. "Nah, it's not suitable for my power Upanishad." "Ziyao." Right at this moment, Xia Xian Yin couldn't help but scream and point at something. Inside the sea of surging fire, a massive meatball was like a brain cracking. Ziyao emerged. Her eyes were blank without a gleam of emotion. She rose one hand and grabbed the void. The celestial ice jade flake turned into a cold light and fell into her white hand. A tremendous energy fluctuated from her body. Unexpectedly, it wasn't weaker than De Carlos and Lei Di. When Ziyao had many bright-colored halos ripple behind her, they expanded like light consonances. Her entire body immersed in the bright, divine light and gave people a fantasy, dreamy feeling. However, the aura on her body made people quiver in fear. It was a coldness that no human being should have. Chapter 1333, Gigantic Worm. Chapter 1333, Gigantic Worm under her. The way Ziyao appeared was so bizarre. She emerged from inside a torn chunk of meat, divine light twirling around her. A set of gray armor covered her beautiful body that looked like shells of some strange insect. The armor had many cracks-like patterns with a mysterious energy. Layers of bright-colored halos beautified her, but her face was so cold. She grabbed something in the void and retrieved the celestial ice jade flake. Right after that, a cold energy expanded unceasingly in this area. The heaven flames Shi Yan's released were extinguished as soon as that kind of cold energy reached them. The deep-to-bone coldness was like ice water pouring into people's sea of consciousness. Shi Yan shuddered. His face changed when he shouted her name. "Ziyao." He focused on Ziyao. A beam of light that was a wisp of his soul shot out of his eyes. Shi Yan wasn't dull. At first glance, he knew that Ziyao was possessed, and of course, the thing that had occupied her soul altar and sea of consciousness was that unknown, evil thing. He used the soul attack to wake up Ziyao's soul. His wisp of soul didn't meet any obstacle. It got into Ziyao's brain easily and magically. Abruptly, the chilly feeling of entering a glacier shot back into Shi Yan's soul. He couldn't help but shiver. Checking his condition, he was scared in seeing his soul atlas frosting. Ziyao's finger like the scallion flickered. The celestial ice jade flake shot out a cold, in energy that seemed to have activated some magical formation. When that cold energy emerged, strange, PTFFF sounds echoed from countless massive meat lumps around. People then saw the swaying meatballs act faster. They began to devour each other. After a short course of dozens of seconds, a gigantic creature was built in front of Shi Yan's group. That thing was some sort of a worm that they had never seen before. Its entire body was white-gray with countless, disgusting lumps like toad skin. As it had just been formed, the worm didn't have eyes yet. However, its shape was as massive as a life star, and it was dozens of times larger than Lady's monster form. After the nauseating, spectacular worm congregated, a chain of muffled murmuring came from inside its body. It was strange, as if it was communication between different souls. It was so evil and bizarre. Ziya was standing on that massive worm. She looked just as big as a speck of dust compared to the worm. The celestial ice jade flake on her hand sparkled and released cold energy, trying to freeze the entire place. During this process, DeCarlos and Lady didn't move. Their eyes were bright as they observed the alien. They looked astounded, indeed. Xia Xianyan's exquisite face had a gleam of fear. She looked at Ziyao. Similar to what Shi Yin did, she released her soul consciousness to communicate. The wisps of cold aura like icy fibers attacked her graceful body. Immediately, she had a layer of twinkling frost on her body. She was frightened. Blood trickled down the corners of her mouth. As soon as it emerged, her blood was frozen. It looked bizarre on her face indeed. Swoosh! A tangerine flame came on time and ran one lap around her body. The cold aura on her body was washed away. Are you all right? Shi Yin appeared by her. Holding her hand, he released a current of warm energy to her body. She's possessed. Xia Xianyan slightly shook her head. The blood ice on her pink lips melted. She used a white handkerchief to wipe it. She sounded worried. We have never seen this thing before. You should be careful. You must retain a bit of energy just in case. Those two, they're not from our side. Shi Yin nodded. We're correct. That thing has life and intelligence. It's a high-level living being. It's proven as it could possess that little girl's soul. It's a big surprise to see such a massive worm in this vast, mysterious universe. Apparently, DeCarlos didn't consider Ziyao's situation. He looked at the peculiar worm and gave compliments. His white hair moved without the wind. The space energy rippled through his body. It looked like he had urged the ultimate space power Upanishad instantly. Lady didn't answer. Thunder rumbled in his body and shook the entire place as if it wanted to shatter this void here. Lady didn't hesitate and turned into his real monster body in the earth-shattering thunder. A brutal silver dragon emerged in the sky filled with lightning beams. His aura of the primal, immemorial beast swarmed over. Anyway, although his thunder dragon body wasn't small, it was still comparably tiny. It was like a man standing by a massive mountain. DeCarlos, that thing is really frightening. My instinct tells me that I hate it and I feel insecure. Lady's serious voice thundered from the dragon's mouth. Altogether, the lightning balls as big as a windmill flew out from his mouth. The crystal lightning balls gathered the dazzling electric strikes and dashed toward that freaky worm. He had used his best powers. DeCarlos discolored. He was also shaken. He rarely saw Lady in that grave countenance. Lady was showing that he was facing the strongest enemy. He knew that Lady, the ancestor of heavenly monster tribe, could somehow know the level of the alien enemy. It was his instinct. From Lady's performance, he apparently considered that worm his most powerful enemy. He was trying his best. DeCarlos could feel something wrong. He contemplated for a few seconds and then said, "My advice to you guys. You should leave now. Otherwise, at the critical moment, I'm afraid that we can't take care of you. I'm connected to Grace Mainland. With only a thought, I can use the space door to escape. You don't need to worry about me," said Shi Yin. DeCarlos frowned and looked at Xia Xianyan. He sighed inwardly but said nothing. His body suddenly quivered and sent his massive spatial energy towards the gigantic worm. Roar! Roar! Lady roared and spurted countless spinning lightning balls. Each lightning ball was enough to destroy the mountains, rivers, and even the sea. It carried the power of the expert at second sky of a mortal realm. Several thousand lightning balls came out unceasingly from Lady's mouth and bombarded that bizarre worm. The earth-shaking lightning balls created big holes with sticky pus. However, those massive holes just twitched and closed. They were healed almost instantly. Its self-recovery ability was so terrifying. After the meatballs congregated, they had become much more terrifying. When Lady began to attack the worm, Xiao suddenly got into the meatball and disappeared. The aura on that giant worm increased further. People felt even colder. Shi Yin was chilled. He lowered his voice. "Remember, don't come near that worm." Shi Yin had an inexplicable, unknown feeling. He thought that the worm didn't move and just let Lady and DeCarlos attack it because it hadn't finished the fusion yet. It was adjusting its structure. It was like a sleeping person whose body went numb and needed time to get a grip when he or she got up. Shi Yin had this feeling. Shi Yin was extremely insecure. Together with that, he caught a feint of something familiar. It seemed like he knew what this worm was. This feeling didn't come from his host soul, but the co-soul in Grace Mainland. His co-soul was Grace Mainland, the life and consciousness of the planet that which had experienced countless years. No one knew how long it had existed, but surely it had been there much longer than the four great creatures. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. All of a sudden, the disasters in this area were revived. They all swarmed over. Explosions occurred everywhere. The deadly storm came with icy, twisting energy and even the drops with tremendous piercing power. The terrifying dangers came and were aimed at DeCarlos and Lady. The streamers everywhere towered the entire space and swarmed over them like a shower of meteors. The eccentric worm wiggled its massive body. It seemed to finally wake up after a long slumber. When it moved, the meat lumps on its body fumed the black smoke that then gathered like a terrifying evil soul. That dark soul was so cold, wiggling and snatching over Lady. Lady roared and thundered, continuously releasing more lightning strikes. The entire sky was connected with lightning and electric beams. Countless lightning bolts as big as an arm crawl thickly. This commotion had energy that was able to shatter people's minds. DeCarlos also looked heavy. He had used his strongest attack and sent countless spaces like big nets over the giant worm. He wanted to confine the worm in his space energy. Shi Yin saw the worm being covered inside dozens of spaces that then connected and strengthened each other. It was like someone being confined inside a steel cage. Then, they used another bigger steel cage to cover that cage, and it went on to so many layers. However, the big worm was still moving as if nothing had happened. Shi Yin could see the worm getting angry through dozens of clear space confinements. It was like an enraged beast. Then, he saw DeCarlos's pale, blood trickling down the corner of his eyes. The worm only wiggled, and it could hurt DeCarlos severely. It had damaged the soul of this expert at second sky of a mortal realm. Only DeCarlos knew that many layers of space confinements that he had placed on the worm were shattering rapidly. Every time one of them broke, it felt like a dagger was stabbing his brain. It was so painful that he couldn't help it. What is this thing after all? DeCarlos shouted. He tried to think while blood oozed out of the 7 holes on his face. He was shocked when he thought of a possibility. Would it be that thing? DeCarlos changed his face, his eyes so frightened. Seconds later, he screamed, "Lady, we can't counter this. I'm taking you out of here." Chapter 1334, Creatures of the Absolute Beginning. Chapter 1334, Creatures of the Absolute Beginning _ DeCarlos shouted and hurried toward Lady. He wanted to leave immediately. He had even ignored the layers of space confining the massive worm. DeCarlos, what the heck is that? Lady shook his dragon's head. The dim lightning bolts shot out of his silver body and swarmed toward the worm. Don't waste your energy. We can't deal with it. DeCarlos was still bleeding. He looked helter-skelter, and he forced a smile. At the same time, Shi Yin's countenance changed. He looked extremely panic-stricken. The ring spirit Ming Hao had restricted was screaming inside the blood vein ring as it had just received an unknown force. His soul moved into the blood vein ring. He then found so many complex barriers and restrictions inside the blood vein ring. Those barriers layered and shrouded a gray soul. That gray soul should be the ring's spirit. When the layers of complicated barriers were like mirrors with so many cracks, the ring spirit's aura inside the seal became fiercer. This ring spirit wasn't the original one. Xin Shan had used the origin of ancient god continent to guide it here. It would be a soul from another universe like Shi Yin. It had swallowed the genuine ring spirit and schemed to take his soul. Later on, its ambition grew bigger as it wanted to collect bloodthirsties' remains to resurrect itself. Ming Hao had used his supernatural power to seal that thing inside the ring. However, under some special circumstances, it could contact Shi Yin. However, the restriction Ming Hao had created was torn now. The ring spirit was wiggling to get rid of it. De Carlos was screaming as he couldn't resist the giant worm. Shi Yin became more restless. He knew that it wouldn't turn out well at all. He pondered for a few seconds and then rose one hand, creating a magical vortex by him. You should return to Grace Mainland first. He rose his hand and sent a tender force at Xia Xian Yin, pushing her into the vortex. He didn't give her time to prepare. At the same time, he touched his glabella. His host soul emerged from his forehead. The blood mark on the host soul's forehead radiated a beam of strange blood light. It was like a signal sent to a mysterious, unknown place. A blood light descended from the sky and fell to the devouring island in the center in the Blood Sea. Bloodthirsty forces, forbidden land. A message came out like a furious current. Xian He and Frederick immediately found it. They changed their face and immediately took action. Shortly afterward, swoosh, a strange light appeared by Shi Yin. Then, a dark soul emerged and turned into a soul clone of Ming Hao. After 2 flashes, Xian He and Frederick appeared, their faces grave. As long as Ming Hao arrived, he saw De Carlos bleeding and ready to take Lady away in fear. Ming Hao was bewildered. He muttered, "Brother." De Carlos halted for a moment. He turned to look at him and shouted, "I don't have an excellent brother like you." De Carlos, Lady thundered, his dragon body struggling. "What are you afraid of?" Xian He and Frederick looked at Shi Yin, or the blood vein ring on his finger to be exact. Xian He said, "Is that ring spirit about to get rid of the seal?" Shi Yin nodded and said to Ming Hao, "The seal you've set up was well made. However, it suddenly shakes a lot now." Ming Hao wore a dark face, snatched the blood vein ring, and sent a wisp of his soul into it. His face changed immediately, and he looked at the giant worm. He closed his eyes as if he was considering something. Then, he opened his eyes, looked at De Carlos, and said, "Brother, is it the thing Master used to tell us?" This time, De Carlos didn't shout at him. He nodded with a bitter face. "It should be." Xian He, Frederick didn't get it. They looked at Ming Hao and De Carlos, trying to guess what they had mentioned. Ming Hao grimaced as De Carlos confirmed it. He said in a low-pitched and stern voice, "That thing is trying to affect the ring spirit. It seems to help the ring spirit to escape." People were bewildered listening to him. Ming Hao frowned. "Don't look at me. I don't know what's going on. I don't know the relationship between that evil thing and the ring spirit." "What's that?" asked Xian He. While they were talking, the massive worm was struggling hard to get rid of De Carlos's layers of spatial confinement. Its planet-like body convulsed, but its aura was blocked. Only De Carlos could perceive it, so only he had to endure it. De Carlos shook as if he got hit hard in his chest. His ashen face had more cuts. He suddenly screamed, "My genuine space seal can't hold it longer. I want to dismiss the barriers. Guys, get ready." "What's that thing?" Xian He and Frederick looked at Ming Hao and shouted at the same time. "A creature from the absolute beginning," answered Ming Hao. Xian He, Frederick, Lady, and Shi Yin were perplexed. Apparently, they had never heard about this before. Netherworld lock armor? Ming Hao hadn't explained it to them yet. With a grim face, he drew the dark souls out of his eyes. Shortly after, hundreds of thousands of spirits bobbed like an entire sea, moving towards De Carlos's space confinement. Together, they had magically improved the genuine space confinement. Surprisingly, most of the spirits were at original God Realm or ethereal God Realm. They had even seen incipient God Realm souls. No one knew how many brutal karmas Ming Hao had created throughout these years to gather this horde of souls. Innumerable souls created a chain armor that covered the space barriers and strengthened DeCarlos's seal. DeCarlos's grimaced face became a little better when the souls supported his seal. He took a deep breath to recover and then said, "With the three of you here, we can confine this immemorial creature. Anyway, I'm sure we can't destroy it, and we don't know how long we can keep it here." Shi Yin dropped his jaw. After Ming Hao, Xin He, and Frederick came here, they had 5 experts at Second Sky of Immortal Realm. This force was enough to clear any other force in this universe, except for the God Clan's force. However, this force was only enough to confine that thing here, and DeCarlo said that they couldn't do that for a long time. What was going on here? More strangely, Ming Hao agreed with his assumption. He said, "Brother, you're correct. We can only hold it here for dozens of years. It's almost impossible to kill it." What's that after all? Lei Di turned into a massive lightning beam. After a flash, he turned into his humanoid form, his face impatient and restless. Heavenly Monster Tribe, Immortal Demon Clan, Imperial Dark Tribe, and God Clan have a history of only 100,000 years. The earliest time recorded in your history is 100,000 years ago. DeCarlos looked at Lei Di and said begrudgingly. However, there's an era called the Absolute Beginning before that. There were creatures in that era, and moreover, they were beyond our knowledge. They were the creatures from the Absolute Beginning. Shi Yin and the others were stunned. Although my teacher was killed by Bloodthirsty, he was still the warrior with the best space power Upanishad in this world. He had never stopped exploring space. He knew many marvelous and old secrets in this world. He had told us the stories of the Absolute Beginning era. DeCarlos frowned. The creatures in that era were very, very powerful. They said that at the beginning, this universe was hundreds of thousands of times bigger than the present one. The star areas were like drops in the sea. My teacher said that because of the competition between the creatures of the Absolute Beginning, it shrunk to the current size of the cosmos. The creatures living in that era were much more giant than the members of Heavenly Monster Tribe. Also, they were spectacular, indeed. Their bodies could look like a mountain or even a sea. Sometimes, a planet can be a creature from that era. They were so massive and their life almost didn't have an end. They knew the original power of the universe. Their competencies were something we could never imagine. So, from what you've said, what's desolate? Intervened Shi Yin. Good guess. Desolate is a creature from the Absolute Beginning era. Ming Hao looked at him. Shi Yin was stunned as if his soul got hit. I can even tell you something. Grace Mainland, Ancient God Continent, Ancient Demon Continent, and God-blessed Mainland used to be parts of Desolate. It's like a person who has a head and 4 limbs. Desolate is the he, and the other continents are its limbs. They used to be one, but they got hurt. Something we could never imagine had cut them and separated them like that, snorted DeCarlos. This time, even Xin He, Frederick, and Lei Di looked frightened. Xin He looked at Ming Hao. He was so confused. After he pulled himself together, he turned to ask Ming Hao, did he tell the truth? Ming Hao kept silent for a while before speaking. I don't know if it's true or not. These things are what my teacher had concluded a long time ago. I've been trying to prove them in the past 10,000 years. I don't dare to confirm anything, but I know it's the closest to the truth. At least, we all know that Desolate has its own consciousness. Because it got terribly hurt, it is turned eccentric like that. Desolate is an Absolute Beginning creature, and so is that thing. None of us have ever fought or talked to them. However, my teacher told us that the Absolute Beginning creatures were invincible and only the other Absolute Beginning creatures could counter it, DeCarlos said sternly. True then, Shi Yin spoke again. Another soul of mine gave me a familiar feeling about that thing. It seems to recognize it. Instantly, everybody turned to focus on him. Ming Hao looked a little touched as he said, We've almost forgotten that you had Grace Mainland's origin. If my teacher assumed correctly, as you fused with Grace Mainland, you have a wisp of Desolate's detached soul. It's not strange that you have a familiar feeling about them. Pondering for a while, he turned to DeCarlos. Brother, you said that nobody had actually fought or talked with the creatures from the absolute beginning era. You're wrong. Someone did, and he even managed to win. Who? DeCarlos was astounded. My former master. Chapter 1335. Living in the Sheep Pasture. Chapter 1335. Living in the Sheep Pasture under her. Ming Hao's former master was bloodthirsty, obviously. He was the most difficult riddle in the vast sea of star in the past dozens of thousands of years. He was also the strongest warrior that people had acknowledged. DeCarlos and Lady changed their countenances slightly. Even Xian He and Frederick were baffled. They asked bewilderedly, how come we never knew this? So then why I'm the leader of the cortege of 8 and not you two? Ming Hao threw them a glance and said deliberately. Xian He and Frederick snorted at the same time. Is it true that Bloodthirsty used to fight the creature from the absolute beginning? He won? DeCarlos was so astounded. Ming Hao nodded, talking. It's true. The mysterious power he got also comes from that victory. I guess he got it from the absolute beginning creature he had defeated. People looked horror-struck. Shi Yin also discolored in fear. He felt shocked. Rumor said that only Bloodthirsty understood and used that kind of anonymous energy. After 10,000 years, the leading forces like the God Clan, the Thousand Fantasy Sect, the Broken Hall, and the Heaven River Temple had kept Bloodthirsty's remains to decode the mystery of that energy. However, until now, no one had figured out how to use that energy. Shi Yin knew that this kind of power was absolutely dangerous. It was perhaps the core power that helped Bloodthirsty rule the world. To get this power, the God Clan had united the big forces to kill Bloodthirsty. Anyway, they hadn't made any progress in explaining the nature of that power. Until now, no one knew where Bloodthirsty came from or where he got the Devouring and the other 8 great power Upanishads. Before Bloodthirsty, the Devouring and the 8 great power Upanishad hadn't existed in this cosmos. Bloodthirsty's existence had spread out the great powers. However, what had actually frightened the strongest experts was another power that Bloodthirsty controlled. It was even more mysterious to find the origin of that power. Listening to Ming Hao, everybody was perplexed because it was inexplicable to them. People who knew Ming Hao knew that he would never talk nonsense. Normally, his conclusion was the result of many years of observing and thorough investigations. If he said something, it was the closest to the truth. Unexpectedly, that kind of energy came from an absolute beginning creature. Lady, DeCarlos, Xian He, and Ming Hao had the dazzling light shoot out of their eyes when they looked at the massive worm. It seemed like they were stirred up. However, shortly after, they discolored in fear. The giant worm, under layers of barriers, began to struggle hard one more time. While it was wiggling, it murmured something. It was some sort of soul language that had never existed in this universe. Its voice whined and sounded archaic. Amazingly, it could get through Ming Hao and DeCarlos seals to expand to the world outside. It was like using the soul to summon something. Tui. DeCarlos couldn't help but spurt blood. He looked paler as he screamed in fear. It's calling for more of its kind. Ming Hao in the soul form twisted as if he also got hurt. He cried, Xian He, Frederick, seal it now. Okay. Xian He and Frederick nodded resolutely, their eyes slightly excited. They urged their power immediately. An immense blood sea overflowed from Xian He's incipient extent that was vast and thick with the isolated, deadly aura. However, inside the sea, the life energy burst out vigorously. The sea acted as a blood membrane and covered the giant worm. Frederick grinned strangely. The pale white wisps of core chi condensed and expanded like a thick white smog. Inside the curtain of smog was the glimpse of millions of white gravestones. They looked like the cold, silent mountains of the demons and ghosts after tens of thousands of years. The white gravestones inside the white smog were made of the corpse chi arrayed in the ancient formation that could destroy the world. Millions of tombstones were planted in the cold and deadly mist. They pressed down on the worm and tried to confine it. At the same time, Lady thundered his dragon roar. He opened his mouth and spurted dozens of thousands of small thunder dragons made of lightning and electric beams. They were like fierce lightning ropes tying the worm. De Carlos, Ming Hao, Xian He, Frederick, and Lady were the 5 existences at the immortal realm. No one could resist this force in this world. If they had strike a star area, it would be enough to destroy it instantly, killing countless life stars and creatures. Under the fierce attack of such force, Shi Yin was affected as he had only second sky of incipient God realm cultivation base. He stood aside and watched. He felt frightened as if his soul altar could be shattered in any minute by the shock waves. Almost instantly, he had turned into the immortal demon body. The shield became his armor. Shi Yin had to gather the god power in his body to create layers of protection. He looked like a bloody rock that could resist all kind of shock waves. He pulled himself together to look at the massive worm. He felt so insecure as if something went wrong. The chaotic space basin didn't have borders or limits. It was infinite, indeed. Then, something strange happened in the area pretty far from where Shi Yin and the others were. Deep inside a space current was a place packed with countless dark clouds with disgusting meatballs inside. While the gigantic worm was murmuring, millions of dark clouds here began to move and gathered. Shortly afterward, they became a massive worm as big as an entire planet. The same change happened not only in that area. Just like that, there were 10 more colossal worms that appeared in the chaotic space basin. They were all so gigantic. The 12's giant worms with similar size filled different areas of the space current. While De Carlos, Lady, Ming Hao, and the others were attacking one of them, the other 11 hissed angrily. Their voices became high, shrieking as if they were outraged. The surface of each worm in the other areas began to ripple. The ripples were like waves of magical space energy. The outer space divine light shot out of their body. They gathered and made a magical, bright-colored bridge. Right then, 11 massive worms wiggled and entered the bridge and disappeared. Dash! Ancient God Continent. Inside the God Zenith, God Lord who had occupied Haig's body was hovering in the middle of a sea of essence, chi, and flesh. Countless corpses from different races bobbed in that sea. They could see the warriors of the human clan, monster clan, demon clan, dark spirit clan, ice clan, and so many others in that sea. Most of them had at least original God realm cultivation base when they were still alive. There were more than millions of corpses packed in the place. All of them looked ash-gray, as if they didn't have a beam of life in them. The God Lord hovered above the sea. The pores in his entire body opened to suck the surging essence, chi, and energy from the bodies. He was recovering his energy at the quickest speed. All of a sudden, his closed eyes opened. The sun, moon, and stars moved inside his eyes radiantly. Master, Heavenly King Light kneeled by him and lifted up his face to watch his lord. Why do you wake up all of a sudden? The God Lord looked cold. He threw the other a glance and then said casually, Summon Carefree, Divine Marshal, and Easygoing. Ask them to come here at the fastest speed. Something earth-shaking is about to happen. Heavenly King Light didn't ask further. He immediately used his soul to send his message to every corner of Ancient God Star area. In a corner of Ancient God Star area on a freezing lunar star, Carefree was holding the moon nucleus in his hand. He was about to teach Ouyang Luo Shuang, but he suddenly shook and said to her, You cultivate here alone. I have to go now. I have something very important to do. On a life star of the Brahmos family in an inn inside a typical city, there was a stunningly handsome man sitting with 2 beautiful ladies with vulgar clothes on his chest. As he was having fun, a light flashed in his eyes. In the next moment, he disappeared into thin as if he had never been there. The current chief of the Charteris family, Charlint, was in a secret chamber together with some elders. They were listening to a handsome man's teaching about the marvelous features of power Upanishads and how to break through to the immortal realm. That man had a cold face like ice, his aura as sharp as a blade. Suddenly, he was startled, lowering his voice. Master called me. He disappeared even before his voice had vanished. leaving a group of panic-stricken members of Charteris family in the secret chamber. They didn't know what happened. Carefree, easygoing, and divine martial, the three heavenly kings had dropped all of their work when they received Light's call. They were heading to ancient God continent at max speed. Just like three shooting lights in the middle of the universe, they could cross billions of miles and pass the sparkling stars after a breath. Shortly after, the three heavenly kings landed on ancient God continent inside the God Zenith. They kneeled down in front of the God Lord. They kept their heads lower and didn't ask a question. Just like the most loyal servants, they were waiting for their master's orders. 100,000 years ago, we had joined many experts to kill Bloodthirsty. We succeeded. Before he died, Bloodthirsty talked to me privately. What he told me has bothered me for so many years and I will never forget it, said the God Lord indifferently, his eyes rippling with many inexplicable waves of energy. The four heavenly kings slightly lifted up their heads and looked at him suspiciously, waiting for his further explanations. We all know that at ethereal God realm, the soul altar has the ethereal extent. After the warrior has entered incipient God realm, the ethereal extent will evolve to the incipient extent. The incipient extent is an independent space that can contain mountains or rivers. The most refined and advanced ones can even have planets. After reaching the immortal realm, the incipient extent will be developed one more time. It won't be different from the real world at that time. Even if we die, our incipient extent can remain independently. I heard that after the immortal realm, the incipient extent still could develop further. At that time, it could produce lives. The God Lord looked at the four and said, real lives, living beings. The high-level living beings like us could be produced in an incipient extent of someone whose realm is higher than immortal realm. The four heavenly kings looked baffled. The God Lord intendedly paused for a while. He suddenly had a bitter gleam flashing on his face. Have you ever thought that our God clan, heavenly monster tribe, imperial dark tribe, and immortal demon tribe are living in someone's incipient extent? Before he died, Bloodthirsty told me that I'm pathetic. I'm just a sheep in someone's pasture. The only thing that makes us different from the others is that we have a good shape with better vision. However, we are still the sheep. In nature, we're no different from the others. Chapter 1336, The Unsolved Riddle. Chapter 1336, The Unsolved Riddle _ The four heavenly kings were baffled listening to the God Lord. They felt like their souls were baptized unknowingly by a fiery flood. Master, you meant the star area where we've ruled for 10,000 years and the universe we live are only things from someone's incipient extent? Like our incipient extent? Carefree looked perplexed and absent-minded. He had lived for 10,000 years, but now he was suddenly downcast. Carefree, divine martial, and Light looked dumbstruck. The four heavenly kings were at the same position with the cortege of 8. In this vast sea of stars, each of them was a miracle and an undying legend. Their existences could be considered eternal. However, at this moment, all of them were too shocked they had even felt hurt. Yeah, like that, the God Lord sounded indifferent. I've been thinking about Bloodthirsty's last words for many years. I think I got it now. Bloodthirsty deserved our respect when he just surpassed the immortal realm. If he had had more time and chances, he could have broken this incipient extent to get rid of the prison. Then, he could have flown freely to the world out there. Pausing for a while, the God Lord said, he was killed in the end, but we didn't destroy him. The real owner of this universe had used our hands to kill him. The four heavenly kings still looked baffled. The God Lord sighed and nodded to them. Without the experience on Desolate 10,000 years ago, if I hadn't had the Genesis fruit, how could our clan have risen? How could I have led the experts to kill him? Listening to him, the four heavenly kings were shaken. They screamed, you mean, Desolate is? It's the thing that owns this universe. Although it got hurt and divided, Desolate is the brain. It created this universe. Our God clan and the other three big clans were created by the four wisps of its soul. Inside Desolate is the fountainhead of power Upanishads. All of our power Upanishads come from there. Desolate is the principle and the truth of this cosmos. Just like the way we control our incipient extent, it can rule all creatures in this universe. It can rule over us. However, its body was divided into 5 parts, leaving it in such a wounded condition and puzzle consciousness. Otherwise, Bloodthirsty couldn't have existed. It wouldn't have used our hands to fulfill its wish. Pausing for a while, Godlord continued, lives and souls born in this universe have its seal when they are born. It's what makes us pathetic. We will be bound to this place. It can control us because those are the rules. Just like we can wreak havoc in our incipient extent, it can destroy the world with a flicker of its mind. Bloodthirsty's dramatic fate occurred because he was born in this cosmos, so he got its mark on his soul too. If not, with Bloodthirsty's power, it would have been enough for him to break out of this prison to fly in the real vast universe. Sighed Godlord. Bloodthirsty's devouring power Upanishad and the other 8 power Upanishad had never existed here before him. Where did he get them? Easygoing was skeptical. Desolate is a creature from the absolute beginning era, but it isn't the only one here. The Bloodthirsty Force's Holy Land, the Dark Abyss, is also a creature from the absolute beginning era. That creature has the form of the cosmic black hole. It can devour everything. Have you ever seen the Dark Abyss swallow the life stars? Said the Godlord. The 4 heavenly kings were puzzled. Light asked, didn't Bloodthirsty use his devouring power Upanishad to do that? That Dark Abyss is an absolute beginning creature. Bloodthirsty got his devouring power Upanishad and the 8 power Upanishads from that creature. However, Bloodthirsty was created by the blood of the God Clan, Immortal Demon Clan, Heavenly Monster Tribe, and Imperial Dark Tribe. Bloodthirsty should be the first creature that Desolate had ever produced, I think. Anyway, no one knows why the Dark Abyss gave him the power Upanishads. These things remain as an unsolved riddle. I have spent 10,000 years to think, but I haven't gotten anything yet. Godlord shook his head. So why did you summon us, Master? Asked Carefree. Besides Desolate and the Dark Abyss we've known, another absolute beginning creature has been awakened. This creature has resided scatteringly inside the space basin. When I broke through to 3rd sky of Immortal Realm, I'd encountered it there. I didn't know what it was at that time, though. When Bloodthirsty told me his last words, I finally understood it after so many years, said Godlord. There's another creature from the absolute beginning era. The 4 heavenly kings were frightened. That thing stays in many different corners of the chaotic space basin. It used to be wounded seriously. That's why it has been sleeping for billions of years. Gradually, after a long time of accumulating energy, it has woken up. In fact, it needed a couple 100 million years to wake up completely. Perhaps this cosmos will be gone, and we won't exist anymore. However, someone has provoked it and woken it up. Godlord's eyes flashed. Our old friends are there. They're about to receive its wrath. What we need to do now is to wait patiently for a chance. I've been recovering my power for a long time, but I have just reached 2nd sky of Immortal Realm. If we can kill that thing and absorb its soul, I can recover my full energy and I can even break the Immortal Realm. At that time, I will have the power to break this prison and Desolate's rule. It will make me a creature from the absolute beginning era too. Even if Desolate recovers fully, I think I can resist it. The 4 heavenly kings were excited. The god blood in their bodies seemed to boil. Their fighting will rising unceasingly. Almost at the same time in the spacious subterranean palace on the Tsunami Star, the 4 Immortal Realm experts including Tian Xie, the president of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce, Caesar, Ling Xiang, and Lorraine were discussing some crucial matters. They were talking about their great scheme to make the Bloodthirsty Force and the God Clan risk their lives together, giving them the opportunity to become the new overlords of this cosmos. While discussing, Tian Xie suddenly turned abnormal. A strange light shot out of his eyes together with so many symbols moving inside his pupils. Beams of bright divine light radiated from Tian Xie's body like rainbows twirling around him. It was extremely magnificent. Tian Xie was talking, but he then stopped with a puzzled face as if he didn't hear what Caesar, Ling Xiang, and Lorraine were discussing. Tian Xie. The other three couldn't help but call him to wake him up and continue their meeting. Tianxia was still indifferent. Not many people knew that Tianxia's power Upanishad was exactly like Zi Yao's, which was from the divine light. In fact, each generation of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce had cultivated many different auxiliary power Upanishads. In fact, many people who knew Tianxia only thought that he had mastered the fire power Upanishad because he was an outstanding blacksmith himself. However, Caesar, Ling Xiang, and Lorraine knew that Tianxia had a special power Upanishad, which was his main power. It was the divine light power Upanishad that was similar to the God Clan's light power Upanishad. However, its mysterious abilities were totally different. At this moment, divine light radiated from Tianxia. The mysterious symbols moved in his eyes, and he gradually murmured something unclear. This kind of murmuring was some sort of archaic language that even Caesar, Ling Xiang, and Lorraine, who had extraordinary knowledge, didn't understand. One thing they knew, Tianxia acted so strangely now. It looked like he had fallen into the bedevilment, resulted from his failed cultivation. Ling Xiang and the others were stern. They discussed to see what they should do. However, Tianxia then looked like he got lightning in his head. The puzzled look disappeared from his eyes. He resumed his sound mind. He pondered for a few seconds and then said, "I don't feel well. Please leave me alone for a while. Wait for me, please." Then, Tianxia flashed and disappeared from the room. He reappeared in the deepest place inside his underground palace, which was the place he hid the jade coffin. The walls of this room were covered with mysterious and complex drawings and formations. A pond was situated in the middle with the strange and marvelous power. The light shadows blended together in that pond and made it an incredible door to someplace. As soon as Tianxia appeared in the chamber, he immediately sank into the pond and coughed a lot. After each cough, his body twitched as if something was trying to invade his body. His face became so cold and clear, which was similar to Zi Yao's previously. He looked cold and arrogant like a god looking at his creatures without any human emotions. The pond where he was soaking had many strange images of vague giant worms. No one knew where they were headed. Waves of cold energy came. Beams of brilliant light shot out from the pond and entered Tianxia's body. The energy rippling from him now was so terrifying. If he let them continue to expand, they could destroy Tsunami Star entirely. So many mysterious symbols flew out of the walls. Millions of them became a thick mesh net that covered the palace to shield it from the energy attacking wave from Tianxia's body. The terrifying energy that could destroy Tsunami Star was forced to stay within Tianxia's body. He shrieked painfully like a beast in a disastrous situation. His body exploded and bled hard. It looked like he would die in the next second. It seemed like he was undergoing some incredible transformation. Chaotic Space Basin. Ming Hao, Xian He, Frederick, De Carlos, and Lei Di, the 5 Immortal Realm experts, had joined hands to subdue the giant worm. They all looked serious as if they were facing the strongest enemy in their entire life. Every time the big worm moved, the 5 of them were shaken hard as if they got hammered in the chest. They looked helter-skelter, indeed. Shi Yin couldn't join the battle at such a level. He could only watch them. He looked horror-struck as he had never thought that there was something in this universe that could resist the joined force of 5 Immortal Realm experts. He had an extremely insecure feeling as he could feel the danger coming closer. This sensitive feeling came from his co-soul and shook him entirely. He didn't know what would happen. Everything here had surpassed his knowledge. What Ming Hao and De Carlos said had destroyed his knowledge accumulated until now. Crack, crack. Suddenly, the noises came from the blood vein ring in Ming Hao's hand. Ming Hao had taken the blood vein ring to seal the ring's spirit one more time. But because of the giant worm that had hurt De Carlos, he had to turn and deal with the worm. Shi Yin didn't know if he had finished casting or improving the seal. But now, when the blood vein ring sounded strange, Ming Hao utterly grimaced. Shi Yan's face also changed. He suddenly remembered what Ming Hao had said. Ming Hao said that the colossal worm seemed to help the ring's spirit break the seal. Chapter 1337. Doomsday is coming. Chapter 1337. Doomsday is coming. Undersir. Crack. The blood vein ring sounded like an eggshell shattering. Ming Hao hadn't reacted when a blood light shot out and disappeared altogether with the blood vein ring. The ring spirit had broken the seal. Ming Hao was using his full force to seal the worm, so he couldn't do anything. He turned grimaced and bewildered. It looked like he got hit hard as his soul-like body faded all of a sudden. He was shaken and his soul was wounded because of the big worm struggling. He pulled himself together quickly and called Shi Yin. Check where it went. Shi Yin flickered his mind and sent his soul consciousness away. Just like he had sent an army of billions of fish in this space, his wisps of soul consciousness tried to see to which direction the ring spirit and the blood vein ring had gone. Unfortunately, the ring spirit and the blood vein ring didn't leave a bit of aura. The faint connection between Shi Yin and the ring spirit was cut off utterly. It has escaped the turbulent space current. I don't know where it went. I've lost the connection completely. After a while, Shi Yin replied, his eyes solemn. He knew the ring spirit was also a soul from another universe. It was mysterious, and no one had known anything about it yet. However, deep in this chaotic space basin, the giant worm could affect the ring spirit and help it lift the seal. Shi Yin found it was extremely inexplicable. Is it true that the ring spirit and the giant worm have some connection? Is it something that they've planned beforehand? Otherwise, why did the worm have to help the ring spirit get rid of the seal? Layers of riddles filled Shi Yan's mind. For the time being, he felt like he was hovering in the middle of some foggy space. Not good. It's increasing its power. What's going on? Shin he had transformed into his immortal demon body. His entire body now had spikes, his eyes as crimson as blood. Around him were rivers that carried energy fluctuations of death and life. He was urging his power to swarm over the worm. However, he didn't look at ease at all. Quite the contrary, he screamed in fear. De Carlos, Lady, and Frederick also said that they realized that the worm was increasing its energy unceasingly. Deep inside Ming Hao's dark eyes was a magical, floating light. It was the connection with innumerable wisps of his soul. After a while, his soul-like body shook violently as he spoke with fear. The entire universe is changing dramatically. De Carlos flickered his soul consciousness hearing that. He was shocked too. Oh my God. Xian He, Lady, and Frederick looked at them, their faces asking and worried. Brother, you try all of your power to hold it. I'm going to show them what's going on out there, said Ming Hao. Both of his hands pulled the void as if he was making a mirror that could reflect the entire sky. Different galaxies appeared in the mirror. Currently, there was the same worm in each area that was identical to the one they were fighting here. Those worms moved around the sea of stars and invaded many high-level life stars. They had released sticky tentacles, drawing and swallowing so many warriors. 11 giant worms were attacking 11 high-level star areas. Surprisingly, they were in the battlefields where the bloodthirsty force and the God Clan were fighting against each other. Each worm was even bigger than a planet. They had earth-shaking power, indeed. As soon as they emerged, they had subdued all outstanding warriors of those high-level star areas. Slowly, they invaded the star areas like it was Doomsday, swallowing all creatures. The giant worms had countless tentacles jutting out of the bodies together with many mouths on bodies. Ming Hao's mirror was clear enough as the experts here could even see the despair on the victims' faces and their extremely helpless screams. Even giant worms had invaded 11 high-level star areas and taken down the life stars. In the middle of the universe, Doomsday seemed to have come to many star areas. No one knew how or why the giant worms arrived. Anyway, in this moment, everybody was filled with terror. Thus, the aura of the massive worm made them so feeble that they couldn't even have a thought of resisting. It was the aura that was beyond their worst imagination. The entire sea of stars was boiling because of the giant worms. The experts of the bloodthirsty force and the God Clan stopped their fight to report to their leaders. Why are there 11 more worms? Xian he soaked in the blood sea. His entire body was red as he shouted in fear. Lady, Ming Hao, and Frederick looked at De Carlos. I should have thought about this earlier. De Carlos looked bitter. I've seen many places with similar clouds in the chaotic space basin. However, I hadn't thought that they could fuse and create those terrifying creatures. Not 11. They are one. They're like my soul, which are the clones of the same body. It's like 4 ancient continents detached from desolate. They have the same aura and soul energy fluctuations. They are one. 11 worms have swallowed the warriors in the other areas. It leads to the energy increase of the worm we're dealing with here. They can transfer the energy to each other. Ming Hao said sternly. Shi Yin nodded. He could see that the 12 worms were actually just one. They had been scattered in different areas in this space basin to capture warriors who had accidentally got in here, taking their energy to recover. It was the same principle as Ming Hao's souls could transfer energy to each other. The thing they called the absolute beginning creature could do the same. It could do even more. Its 12 selves had the same aura and energy fluctuations. There is a barrier between our space and the chaotic space basin. There are barriers between the galaxies too. How could they get there easily? We understand the power of those barriers. Without the right method, it's not easy to cross. Something is wrong here. If it can get in easily like that, it should have done that earlier. Why would it wait until now? Asked DeCarlos. The sea territories of those 11 star areas are destroyed. The space passages were torn open in just a blink of an eye. Those sea territories are utterly destroyed. Ming Hao squinted, his face dark and sinister. Currently, there is only one who can do that in this vast universe. Tianxia. DeCarlos changed his visage. As he used to be an honored member of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce, Tianxia respected him a lot. He knew the competence of Chamber of Commerce. In this vast sea of stars, only Tsunami Chamber of Commerce was capable of destroying the sea territories of 11 star areas at the same time. Even the God Clan and the Bloodthirsty Force couldn't do that. Those star areas had always put up guard against the God Clan and the Bloodthirsty Force. Only Tsunami Chamber of Commerce could use its trading activities to cover for its real operation in the sea territories without being noticed. That's how it could break the sea territory abruptly like that. The sea territory was the entrance to a star area. As it was destroyed through some special method, all the space passages opened wide, which was enough to let the giant worms come through. DeCarlo's scream had intensified people's complexions. Tianxia was the president of the Chamber of Commerce. He controlled a domineering force in this cosmos. No one knew why he had opened the sea territories to welcome the gigantic worms. However, his cooperation had helped the worms get into the place without a single obstacle. And now, the ring spirit had broken the seal and run away. 11 worms were invading the star areas, and the one they were confining here was struggling to get out. After each second, the massive worm's energy increased even further. Obviously, it didn't need much time to get rid of the confinement and counterattack. Doomsday is coming. DeCarlos looked worried as if he didn't have any trick to perform now. We can't put up with it anymore. We shouldn't have provoked this creature from the absolute beginning era. We should have let it sleep. He regretted, but it was too late now. It had escalated to this. Everything seemed to get stuck and they couldn't do anything to help it anymore. This one is the brain. As long as we can destroy it, we can solve the problem. Ming Hao suddenly got his sound mind back. It's really hard to seal the creatures from the absolute beginning. It's almost impossible to destroy them utterly. I think you understand this. DeCarlos gave a forced smile. Then we should hurt it badly, said Ming Hao. Any solution? DeCarlos shook his head. Ming Hao pondered for a while, as if he had finally made up his mind. Yeah, I have a solution, but I don't know what it would result in. However, this is an emergency situation. We can only try. Xin He, Shi Yin, and the others had their eyes brightened when they looked at him. Everybody knew that Ming Hao would never shoot an arrow without a target. If he said he got a solution, it was 100% true. However, this worm was so formidable. They couldn't seal it even if they joined hands. What kind of solution did he get to wound it? Everybody was so curious that they could die just to know how. I'll find you guys a person. Ming Hao's eyes changed. His usage of space power Upanishad wasn't weaker than DeCarlos's. He had created a sparkling door and sent a wisp of his soul consciousness through the door. A silhouette emerged from the door. Sure Yin was surprised. He couldn't help but shout, "Wetterson!" Surprisingly, it was Wetterson, the one who had almost obliterate Fiery Rain Star area, the hybrid between the man tribe and the god tribe. He had terrifying energy with the aura from Gatto, the chief of Corrosion Force. "What did you call me for?" "You've saved my mother and our man Star, but I only agreed to help you deal with the God Clan. There's no God Clan here." After Wetterson got out, he looked impatient with a murderous aura. He had traveled a long way to return to his homeland to save his mother and his fellows from the Breckelfeld family's slaughter. However, after he had arrived, he found that the Breckelfeld family had already ordered to murder his tribe. Ming Hao, who had observed every move of his secretly, had saved them beforehand. Of course, he did that to have Wetterson on his side. Wetterson was grateful. He told Ming Hao that he would go against the God Clan. What Sure Yin had thought was that Ming Hao had helped him achieve and arrange properly. He thought he had successfully recruited Wetterson. Because of many killed Man Tribe's warriors in Wetterson's homeland, his resentment at the God Clan had totally burst out. His name is Wetterson. When he was small, his appearance was different from the others of his own kind because of his god bloodline. The elders of the tribe had abandoned him in a pond on Man's Star. He had absorbed all the erosive liquid in the ponds. That liquid had Gatto's blood and the power from our master's remains. Ming Hao looked at Sure Yin and said, "Give me master's remains." In this universe, only Wetterson can currently take in the energy from master's remains. After he takes in the energy, he can release the erosive energy ultimately. Even if he can't melt down this giant worm, he still can hurt it a lot. Chapter 1338, Frantic Bursting. Chapter 1338, Frantic Bursting. Wetterson would never forget what happened to him when he was just a little child. That event had changed his life forever and predestined him to not be ordinary. He was born a mixed blood between the God Clan and Man Tribe. When he was a small child, he looked much thinner and more handsome than any other kid in the tribe. He was weak, but he knew how to use earth and heaven energy to create a strange magnetic field that could control things. His special, deadly field, Power Upanishad, didn't help him earn respect. Instead, it made him an alien in his own tribe. After the elders checked his blood, they found that he wasn't pure. They thought that he was a monster, so they abandoned him in the deadly swamp area. The water in the worm was filled with acid poison. Even warriors of the Man Tribe were eroded to death if they fell into the swamp. When Wetterson was too young to understand how cruel people could be, he was thrown there. They let him survive on his own. As soon as he got into the swamp, he had to taste the most dangerous agony in this world. His body slowly eroded and dissolved. However, facing death with a lot of screams, he had survived unknowingly. He could even feel all the poisonous water in the swamp that had been drawn into his body. This process took 3 years. 3 years later, the swamp dried up. Wetterson returned and destroyed the elders who had thrown him there. With his unrivaled power, he became the top warrior of the Man Tribe. Eventually, he became the Lord and the Man King of the Man Tribe. Sure Yin, give him master's remains. Let him absorb them. Only when he becomes mad and triggers the power from master's remains can he erode this absolute beginning creature, said Ming Hao. Sure Yin was surprised. Xian He and the others looked stern and heavy. They were surprised and they looked at Ming Hao, expecting a clearer explanation. Gatto died utterly that year. Ming Hao looked at the others. Before he died, Gatto had received master's remains. He died on the Man Star, Wetterson's homeland, in a low-level, rural star area. He died with master's remains. However, his Power Upanishad was very special. After he died, his Corrosion Power Upanishad remained and covered master's remains. After so many years, Gatto's corrosive power had successfully dissolved that piece of master. Gatto's power and body were dissolved in that swamp area. Thus, that swamp was the essence of his Corrosion Power Upanishad, which had continuously eroded master's remains. When Wetterson was abandoned there, it was the moment the Corrosion Power Upanishad had finally melted master's bone. He was so lucky. He should have been dissolved there. No one knows how he could absorb all the essence of the swamp and get Gatto's power into his blood and flesh altogether with the power from Master's bone. It's also the reason why he can reach the immortal realm power level when he bursts out his frantic power despite the fact that he is at second sky of incipient god realm cultivation base. What has bestowed him the terrifying energy isn't Gatto's corrosion power Upanishad. It's the power from Master's bone. Ming Hao told them what he had concluded and assumed. People were looking at Wetterson as if he was a dormant demon that could destroy the entire world when he got mad. In fact, when he was in Fiery Rain Star area, if they let Wetterson continue to be in his frenzy, he could have destroyed the entire Fiery Rain Star area. All was because of the power in Bloodthirsty's remains. Right now, the absolute beginning creature that had been dormant in the chaotic space basin for billions of years and was much older than the four great creatures was awakened. It was as powerful as a destructive god. The other 11 clones of it were annihilating the 11 star areas at the same time. Its host body here had its energy increase massively and continuously. Ming Hao and the others failed to seal it. It seemed like no one could subdue this thing in this vast universe. Ming Hao was begrudging. Eventually, he had to take out the furious bomb, Wetterson. He had told everyone what had happened to him, and now, he wanted to use Wetterson's magical power to damage this creature from the absolute beginning era. Listening to him, Wetterson looked grief-stricken. Slowly, a harsh light appeared in his eyes. Why do I have to help you guys? How do I know if you are telling the truth? If you don't cooperate with us, everyone here and many more living in the 11 star areas will be destroyed. Perhaps this entire universe will collapse. Your family can't survive this disaster. Ming Hao's cold voice chilled people's hearts. He looked at Wetterson and said simply. He rose one hand and gestured a touch. The images in the space mirror became clear again. In 11 star areas, the giant worms had attacked each of the lively life stars. Their tentacles tied the warriors and drew them into the stomachs. The warriors there had to suffer from tragic deaths. Wetterson looked at the mirror, his face cold. After a while, he turned to Shi Yin. The others also turned to Shi Yin. These pieces of remains are taken from Ling Xiang, Caesar, and Lorraine. I intended to bring them back to the Holy Land. But now, it seems like they have a much more important role here. Shi Yin touched his forehead and 3 jade boxes flew out of his incipient extent. The boxes with Bloodthirsty's remains fell on Wetterson. Wetterson rose his hands to receive, his face cold and dark. However, a magical light shot out of his eyes when he touched the boxes. Oh, I feel close to the things inside the boxes. Everybody was shocked. How should I absorb them? He looked at Ming Hao. I don't know. No one has ever successfully figured out the secret of Master's remains. The ones who got the remains have spent 10,000 years to study. Unfortunately, even the godlords failed. You're the only one who has succeeded. I can feel Master's aura from you. I think you should figure out how to absorb them yourself, said Ming Hao sadly. Wetterson was stunned. During this time, the worms struggled harder. Xian He, Frederick, De Carlos, Ming Hao, and Lei Di had to focus wholeheartedly to arrange more barriers. The rivers with the power of death and life, billions of soul wisps, thunder dragons, different spaces, and Corp-Chi ropes tied the worm. The 5 of them wore stern faces as they were under tremendous pressure. Lei Di had turned into his dragon form, roaring and thundering. Apparently, they had to endure a harder resistance from the worm. Then, a graceful body emerged from one of the meat lumps of the giant worm. Her cold eyes didn't convey any human emotions. She was arrogantly and proudly looked at the others. She spoke a strange, unknown language, piercing through layers of barriers to reach 11 star areas. It was Ziyao. She stood on the giant worm, as if she was standing on the summit of an imposing mountain. Compared to the worm, she was so minute, but her eyes and her posture said that she was the master. The beautiful divine lights were like 5-colored clouds that wound around her body and made her extremely beautiful. She suddenly turned to look at Shi Yin, her eyes showing some strange emotion. Her lips parted as she said one word that was different from all known languages. But Shi Yin understood. That word was desolate. Ziyao called him desolate. Boom. His co-soul deep in the core of Grace Mainland had come to Shi Yan's soul altar quickly after it had pierced through layers of barriers. The clusters of heaven flames supported the co-soul. The co-soul floating above the flames was like a more magnificent flame releasing dazzling and formidable energy. That energy surged and washed around Grace Mainland, shaking the peripheral area. "Don't look at her," Ming Hao shouted, his saber-like voice stabbing Shi Yan's brain. Shi Yan felt so cold. He woke up and bit the tip of his tongue. His immortal demon blood turned into a warm current and released his whole body energy in just a blink of an eye. "Sink!" he screamed in his soul. The co-soul from the soul altar directly flew into his incipient extent and turned into a vast sea of fire there. The co-soul had shut itself down. After the co-soul had entered his incipient extent, it cut off all kinds of connection. He didn't hear Ziyao's voice anymore. When he couldn't understand her voice, the feeling of his soul shattering disappeared. He suddenly felt like he survived a disaster. He knew that if he hadn't been resolute enough to send the co-soul to his incipient extent to cut off the connection with the other could invade his soul and burst off his host soul and co-soul. He didn't dare to look at Ziyao anymore, not even a glance. He forced himself to focus on Wetterson. Then, Wetterson had opened all the 3 jade boxes. Strangely, the invisible pieces of Bloodthirsty's remains had become visible after he touched them. Right after that, Wetterson decided to apply the most direct method. He put the bone into his mouth and swallowed directly without even chewing. The massive bone moved through his throat to the stomach. This horrible scene made Shi Yan sweat in fear. He thought that the bone could tear the man's throat in any minute. Wetterson swallowed 3 pieces of Bloodthirsty's remains at once. "Don't you want to chew it a little bit?" Shi Yan asked, feeling strange and chilled. "Can't chew." Wetterson had to wiggle to swallow the bones. He answered with a red face full of wrath. Then, his belly ballooned. It was ballooning at a speed that naked eye could observe. It was like the process of a 9-month pregnancy shortened within several seconds. Wetterson's stomach became swollen and sounded strange. Wetterson paled immediately, clutching his stomach and screaming as if a beast was dying. His voice was earth-shaking, indeed. He was drowned into madness again. His body became taller, and the waves of earth-destroying erosive energy diffused from him. He was many times stronger than when he was in Fiery Rainstar area. After he had swallowed 3 pieces of Bloodthirsty's remains, he seemed to turn into some sort of monster. The formidable aura on his body increased continuously as if it would never stop. It was much faster than the increasing speed of the worm's energy. It was horrifying to the others. "Roar!" Wetterson roared and shrieked. His body seemed to explode. The pores in his entire body frantically emitted erosive gas that blended in his special deadly field. Everything expanded in just a blink of an eye. "Scatter! Stay behind the worm. Let the worm bear his erosive energy," Ming Hao shouted ear-piercingly. Everybody hurried. They didn't hesitate to dodge the spear. All moved at their fastest speed to hide behind the giant worm and let it face Wetterson. Chapter 1339. Good Fortune Fills Up to the Sky. 1339. Good Fortune Fills Up to the Sky. Ziyao's eyes didn't have human emotions when she stood on the giant worm. All of a sudden, a 7-colored light shot out of her eyes. It seemed like she was frightened for the first time. She looked at Wetterson, her face grave. At the same time, the giant worm struggled harder and raised the waves that could shake the space and time, releasing the world-destroying energy. Ming Hao's pressure multiplied. It seemed like the giant worm suddenly rocketed its energy, which almost shattered the net of barriers confining it. It had forced Ming Hao's group to release more energy to fix the net. They had to use their god power massively. Shi Yan didn't join their sealing work. At his cultivation base, he couldn't join this operation. He looked at Wetterson. The thick, erosive energy wildly emitted from Wetterson together with his expanding, deadly field. The space in this turbulent basin sizzled like boiling water. The erosive energy brought within the destructive aura that could dissolve any creature. It was so terrifying. Eventually, it reached the giant worm. The worm struggled more fiercely. "Subdue it with your full force," shouted Ming Hao. Xian He, Frederick, De Carlos, and Lei Di were using their supernatural power at second sky of a mortal realm and applying the power Upanishads they had been cultivating for 10,000 years. The blood-red rivers had subtle changes between life and death. The corpse chi had turned into many ropes that could even tie down the world altogether. Different destructive spaces multiplied, and the outraged thunder dragons were attacking the colossal worm altogether. The massive worm was fixed at its spot. Finally, Mad Wetterson's erosive energy had arrived at the worm. Ming Hao's eyes had a happy light. He squinted and the barrier on the worm's body slid apart. A sucking force came out of the slit and drew Wetterson's erosive energy into the planet-sized worm's body. Puff, puff, puffed. The fierce, erosive energy madly came like the strongest acid pouring on the giant chunk of meat. The giant worm fumed thick, dark smoke. It shrieked in pain like an outraged beast. After Wetterson had swallowed the 3 pieces of bloodthirsty's remains, his wildness burst out with unimaginably incredible power. It looked like he had to burn his vitality to trigger the power in bloodthirsty's remains. That kind of energy was beyond people's knowledge. It had strengthened the corrosive power and made it able to destroy the entire world. A thick, dark mist diffused from the worm's body as the corrosion power Upanishad hit it. The thick mist then congregated into countless floating clusters of clouds. They looked like they had individual lives and were trying to get rid of the worm and the danger. Boom! Right at this moment, Shi Yin was shaken hard. His body couldn't help but shake violently. The acupuncture points in his entire body acted like massive pumps with endless capacity. Innumerable dark clouds flew out of the worm like a school of young swallow birds returning home. All of them overflowed toward Shi Yin and entered his acupuncture points. A surging vitality moved violently inside his acupuncture points. It was so abundant that Shi Yin whined in pain. So many jet black clouds fumed out of the giant worm had entered Shi Yin's acupuncture points. Strangely, they directly turned into mysterious energy without being filtered or refined. It was like a current of warm water or original fluid that could make life evolve. After moving around the vortexes in his acupuncture points, the energy emitted directly. A part of the mysterious energy entered his incipient extent. The world in his incipient extent expanded immediately. In just a blink of an eye, so many dazzling, diamond-like stars were born. On those stars, when Shi Yan's thought changed, the mountains, rivers, and forest appeared together with the clouds in the skies. Except for having insects or creatures, the worlds in his ethereal extent weren't very different from the real world. Another part of energy entered his limbs and seeped into his veins, tendons, skeleton, blood, and even his cells. The mysterious, unknown energy was absorbed by his body like a sponge that sucked water. It was a marvelous feeling that he couldn't describe. Nothing could be compared to this. His life and body sublimated at the same time. He had a magical feeling as if he had been transformed like when he had first descended to Grace Mainland and soaked in the blood pond. Countless jet black clusters of clouds that drifted away from the worm body should have some wisps of soul consciousness within. However, Shi Yan's devouring power Upanishad had controlled his acupuncture points and absorbed them all. The clouds moved one round through the vortexes where the wisps of soul consciousness in it were destroyed, leaving only the mysterious, pure energy. This sort of pure energy was like the original fluid that could filter life and give a tonic to his soul and body. His body, soul altar, and incipient extent sublimated altogether. Wetterson had used 3 pieces of bloodthirsty's remains to create catastrophic, erosive energy. He was now much stronger than Gatto. His erosive energy had attacked the worm and made it disperse and flee, which gave way for Shi Yan's devouring power Upanishad. Shi Yin was just standing and watching indifferently, but now, he had become the one who was the best at this. He had taken in every black cloud drifting away from the gigantic worm. Wetterson was sinking in his insanity. The worm could have dodged his erosive energy. It could have at least run away. But right now, Xin He, Ming Hao, and the others were trying to seal it. They were fixing it here and making it face Wetterson's erosive attack directly. The billion-year-old absolute beginning creature had emitted mysterious energy when it got hurt. This kind of energy was like pure energy from the origin. It didn't need to be refined or filtered before Shi Yin could use it. It had boosted Shi Yin altogether. At this moment, Shi Yin felt so comfortable. It was like the path of an ordinary human heading to be a warrior and a warrior becoming the almighty God. Every second, his bones, blood, and flesh were soaked in the energy from the acupuncture points. It was the first time he felt like his body was an ocean that would never be filled. Every piece of him, including his bones, blood, flesh, cells, and even the tiny hair, had become so greedy that they had swallowed all the energy from the acupuncture points without feeling tired. It was his instinct to evolve. His incipient extent was expanding too. Innumerable stars were twinkling. His sea of stars widened and his space was enlarged. The energy from the massive worm was greater than his cognition. It was much more powerful and miraculous than the energy he had taken in from the warriors throughout these past years. This sort of marvelous energy had seeped into each of his tiny cells. At the same time, his god power ancient tree had the tonic from the mysterious energy. However, it was different from the past, and the god power ancient tree didn't grow up as it was filled. It changed. The crystal branches of the ancient tree had connected to all veins of his body magically. At this moment, the god power ancient tree and his veins slowly fused into a whole. Shi Yin was shaken hard. He knew what it meant. The god power ancient tree was the source of the power, and the veins were the key channel to perform the power Upanishad's abilities. Every time he urged any kind of power, he needed to draw the energy from the god power ancient tree, which then pumped through the veins and transformed through his soul consciousness and power Upanishad. The process when the energy was poured into the veins from the god power ancient tree often slowed down the preparation of an attack. It was because the god power ancient tree stayed in the lower abdomen and it wasn't connected to the veins. However, from this moment, the branches of Shi Yan's ancient tree had directly connected to each of his veins. As soon as his mind flickered, his god power would surge vehemently into his veins. He just needed time to form a thought in his mind to strike a blow. There would be no delay or energy consumed along the way. He could maximize the effects of his abilities. Wetterson was still madly releasing his power and using the last bit of energy inside Bloodthirsty's remains. The massive worm twitched and struggled harder. It could stab the soul. It had forced Ming Hao and Xin He to deal with it. As Lady had just entered second sky of a mortal realm, it was almost his limit. Blood trickled down the corners of his dragon mouth. Xin He and Ming Hao understood clearly that Wetterson's terrifying energy showing was because of 3 pieces of Bloodthirsty's remains. After the energy inside the bones ran out, he would be like a lamp running out of oil. He couldn't maintain the attack for a long time. If they couldn't hurt the worm and make it dormant again, all of them would turn into ashes. Thus, they didn't regret hurting themselves to use their greatest powers that they had hidden for a long time to subdue the worm and force it to receive Wetterson's erosive attack. No one had paid attention to Shi Yin. In their eyes, the one who was called the newly elected master of the bloodthirsty force was just a small character who didn't matter at all. A second sky of incipient god realm warrior couldn't do anything in this area. They didn't care about him, and they didn't have time to care, either. Thus, they didn't know that while they were trying their best to seal the massive worm and Wetterson was burning his vitality to urge Bloodthirsty's remains, Shi Yin was having the most magical quenching time in his entire life. Save me. All of a sudden, a fearful, soft soul message arose in Shi Yan's brain. Shi Yin lifted his head to look at Ziyao, standing on the massive worm. This time, Ziyao didn't speak the language of the absolute beginning creatures. Shi Yin understood her words. At this moment, Ziyao had half of her body stuck into the meat of the worm. Her beautiful face was sad and painful, her eyes begging him sincerely. Shi Yin also looked at her. He was suddenly doubted and baffled, but shortly after, he became resolute. You're not her. It's me. It's me. Ziyao had tears lingering in her eyes as she gently wiggled and showed that she was trying to flee. Shi Yin could see something like tendons tying down her slim waist and legs. She couldn't get rid of them. You aren't her. Shi Yin followed his sound mind, closing his eyes and not looking at her. You're so cruel. Ziyao screamed in a high-pitched voice. Shi Yin was indifferent. It's true that I'm not her. But she's me. She's part of mine. Her soul has fused with 10 wisps of my soul consciousness. She's now a clone of mine, a clone with human emotions and desires. If I perish, she will also die. Do you really want to see her die? Ziyao's voice drilled into his head, but Xin He and Minghao didn't realize that. Listening to her, Shi Yin was shaking hard because he knew that she spoke the truth. It was somehow a soul intuition. Chapter 1340, The Unchanged Heart in Front of Thousands of Enticements. Chapter 1340, The Unchanged Heart in Front of Thousands of Enticements. What the absolute beginning creature said was like thunder booming in Shi Yan's head. Strangely, he agreed with its last idea. He knew that the creature told the truth. Ziyao was now a part of it. If it perished, Ziyao would turn into ashes and nothing would be left behind too. The other had considered it a chance to overturn the situation. It wanted to force him to attack Wetterson or tear Minghao's seal. Previously, he didn't have such an ability. But now, the energy fluctuating from his body was very terrifying now and over his understanding. He believed that if he tried his best, he could break this balanced situation. The magical power from that absolute beginning creature had wholly sublimated his bones, soul, and incipient extent. He had reached an entire, new height that even he was so astounded himself. As long as you agree to help me, I'll offer you a great opportunity. I'll give you a power that only the absolute beginning creatures could touch. Ziyao guided and enticed him. Each of her words now had an eccentrically charming power. It attempted to sink Shi Yin and make him work for her. A power that only the absolute beginning creatures could touch. Shi Yan's eyes brightened. His heart beat frantically, his soul excited. He immediately grabbed the hidden meaning in the creature's words. This power could be the power that the Godlord, Ling Xiang, Caesar, and even Ming Hao, Xin He were trying to find but fail. It was the mysterious power that only Bloodthirsty knew and used. Ziyao's enticement was like a demon hitting Shi Yan's brain directly. His face turned odd. Clenching his jaw, his face twisted as if he was trying hard to resist this temptation. His eyes gradually turned crimson. After a long time, he faced the sky and roared, laughing loudly inwardly. You can't persuade me. You're a creature from the absolute beginning era that the 5 immortal realm experts are joining hands against to seal for dozens of years. Who can make you perish? You won't die. That man can't kill you. He can only hurt you. You can't shake my heart. You can't entice my sound mind. Boom, boom, boom. In his head, the star dragons emerged and weaved a thick mesh net to make a barrier that covered his brains. He didn't listen to any of her words or let any wisp of the soul enter his head. He had closed his mind. Ziyao's soul fluctuation couldn't get into his head anymore. The begging gleam in her eyes vanished instantly. They looked cold and heartless once again. She gazed at Shi Yin and spoke a whining language that no one understood. Then, she retracted into the big worm's body. Right after that, the giant worm quieted down. A thick, murky, yellow liquid oozed out of the worm's skin. That kind of liquid slowly condensed and froze, creating something like bright yellow keratin that functioned as a layer of marvelous armor and covered the worm's body entirely. It wasn't struggling anymore. It didn't try to lift off the seal anymore and just retracted its body like a hedgehog to defend. It had given up on resisting. Although the erosive energy Wetterson had released was surging and rolling torrentially, its effects were reduced by a lot. The bright yellow keratin on the worm was like a magical barrier that could reduce the erosive speed. The worm still fumed black clouds from time to time, but they became much diluted. Apparently, as it had used all the power to defend, it could reduce the damage to a level it could endure. Now, although Shi Yin had shut himself, His acupuncture points were constantly taking in so many clouds to benefit his entire body. Ming Hao suddenly stopped releasing energy, his eyes dark. Something is strange. The host body is using all of its energy to defend, but its clones are still destroying the world out there. When they all come here, how will we deal with them? De Carlos didn't feel relief at all. He felt more restless, his voice heavy. Ming Hao looked at the space mirror. Except for Shi Yin and Wetterson, everybody was watching the bright mirror. Their faces turned dark. The 11 giant worms were moving around and swallowing almost all of the warriors on the 11 life stars in different star areas. Then, all of them dangled their massive bodies and headed to the sea territories. Although they were giant, they moved swiftly. After one flash, they could move through so many life stars as if they could break the space limit. Its clones want to use the sea territories to reunite with the host body here, said De Carlos in fear. Everybody had ash-gray faces as they felt so helpless. Even Ming Hao wore a dark face as if he was dispirited that he couldn't change the result, no matter how many tricks he had. God Zenith. The God Lord wore a calm face on the mountaintop. His eyes were like the moon and the moving sun. He looked at the hazy star area, his eyes piercing the void to the area of nothingness. Behind him, carefree, divine martial, easygoing, and light, the 4 heavenly kings were standing quietly like the mountains. The elders of the Elder Committee and the heads of the 12 families were kneeling on the ground a little further from the others. They all looked somber as if they had encountered an apocalypse. There was a deep, dark streak in the middle of their foreheads that seemed to not disperse. 11 planet-sized worms appeared out of nowhere in 11 star areas where the God Clan was fighting with the bloodthirsty force. They came directly to the main life star of the star area and ate up all the warriors there. Those warriors included the members of the God Clan and the members of other forces. However, no member of the bloodthirsty force was harmed. This was because the God Clan had claimed, and based on the most important planet of each star area, the elite troops who had trained for 10,000 years, there had become delicious meals for the big worms. It was a lethal attack on the God Clan. They thought that those worms were the secret weapon of the bloodthirsty force and that they were the most ancient ancestors of heavenly monster tribe. They needed the guidance from the God Lord, so they gathered here, waiting for his decision. Feng Zhou represented the Elder Committee and buyers, represented the heads of the 12 families, kneeling on the ground and looking at the God Lord in patience. The God Lord was an extraordinary soul. 10,000 years ago, he had led them to expand the God Clan's territory billions of times. He had killed Bloodthirsty, the one everybody had acknowledged as the peerless warrior in this cosmos. This time, they believed that he could bring them to a higher peak. They believed it so deeply. Each member of the God Clan surviving that time had admired the God Lord from the bottom of their hearts. They worshipped him as he was their real God. This was because the God Lord had never failed them. President Feng Zhou crossed his arms in front of his chest and called. The God Lord was the previous chief of the God Clan, but he wasn't from the 12 families. He was from a small, declined family of the God Clan. However, he had crossed even the sky when he made his debut. He had suppressed the 12 families of the God Clan and created the Elder Committee. He had become the president of the committee that controlled all the activities of the God Clan. Together with the benefits, he had brought the God Clan to the peak of glory. When Feng Zhou called him, the chiefs of the 12 families and the other elders also called him quietly. The God Lord looked at the void. He didn't even turn his head back and spoke indifferently. The time hasn't come yet. Keep waiting. The 4 heavenly kings turned around and frowned at Feng Zhou's group, their faces dark. Immediately, Feng Zhou and the crowd kneeling on the ground felt so cold. They lowered their heads more and didn't dare to speak. The God Lord's eyes radiated a bright light that then turned into a light curtain carrying 6 heavenly fragrant soul-soothing jade boxes. 5 of them contained Bloodthirsty's remains, and the other one kept his skull. Heavenly King Light found that skull. The 6 boxes arose and hovered in the middle of the light curtain. The God Lord looked at them quietly as if he was planning something. Thornton, he suddenly hissed. Yes, sir. Thornton, the chief of the Breckelfeld family, replied to the call. He thought that the God Lord wanted to make him bear the responsibility for the failure in Fiery Rain's star area. Wetterson, the mixed blood with the man tribe, who was his father. Is he still all right? Asked the God Lord. Thornton was bewildered and answered honestly. He's the son of my uncle Moya. He was hurt severely in the operation of killing Glue 3,000 years ago. He was brought to God-perishing land to recover. However, Glue's chaos power Upanishad had killed him slowly. Where are his remains? The God Lord's eyes brightened. In our family's graveyard. We used a 10,000-year cold jade coffin to preserve him. Each of us powerful members will be kept in a 10,000-year cold jade coffin after one of us in the battlefield. We've followed the rules you've set. We have never changed it, Thornton answered respectfully. When the God Lord fought the world in the past, he had set up many rules. One of the rules was that the chiefs of the 12 families had to use a jade coffin to preserve the experts whose names were written in the Book of Gods. The later generations could visit their coffins after every 100 years to remember their precursors who had died for them. Remembering the late precursors and encouraging the young generations to admire, the experts made them consider dying on the battlefield a pride. Excellent, the God Lord nodded and said. Use the teleport formation to return to your family and bring that jade coffin here for me. I want Moya's body. Remember to do it as quick as possible. Pausing for a while, he added as if he couldn't ease his mind. Carefree, you go with him. Do it as fast as possible. Carefree didn't say anything. He didn't even leave Thornton time to talk more. He grabbed Thornton, walking to the nearest teleport formation. Feng Ju and most of the chiefs of the families were skeptical, but no one dared to ask. They knew the God Lord would never make a mistake. Each of his orders hid a deep meaning that they couldn't understand. They trusted him unconditionally. After a long time, a cold moonlight emerged. Carefree reappeared and held up a 10,000-year cold jade coffin. To make it faster, he had ditched Thornton and returned alone. Boom! He dropped the cold jade coffin, then stood upright and spoke nothing. The God Lord nodded to him and showed his content. He rose one hand to lift up the lid of the jade coffin. A frozen corpse of an old God clan warrior was taken out. That corpse wore luxurious clothes. Although he looked pale, there were no decayed spots on his body. It was the effect of the 10,000-year cold jade coffin. Forgive me for offending you. The God Lord slightly bent his body to show his respect to Moya's body. Then, his 5 fingers cut Moya's cold corpse open. The 6 jade boxes with bloodthirsties remains floating in front of him opened at the same time. The 6 invisible bones were shoved into Moya's stomach. The God Lord made some hand seals. Billions of subtle symbols flew out of his eyes and fell into Moya's abdomen. Moya's body shrank like a balloon without air. Several seconds later, Moya turned into a small dot. Swoosh! Moya's corpse exploded and vanished. No one knew where the God Lord had thrown him. Chapter 1341, Transform. Chapter 1341, Transform, _. Deep in the chaotic space basin, the giant worm had crouched its body with a layer of bright keratin. It was using its best power to defend. Wetterson's erosive energy had eroded it, but his power was reducing. At Minghao's level, he could feel the worm still have its energy slightly increase. It wasn't really hurt. At this moment, the other 11 worms were storming toward the sea territories to reunite with the main body here. The 5 Immortal Realm warriors joining hands couldn't kill this massive worm. If they had to face 11 worms at the same time, they wouldn't have even a chance to win. Minghao was full of stratagems, but he didn't have a solution now. His eyes turned dark and his mind heavy. Xian He, Frederick, De Carlos, and Lady winced. They felt so helpless facing this massive worm. They knew that not long afterward, the 11 clones of this worm would arrive. Once they came, they could only run helter-skelter. The universe where they dwelled and the star area they were fighting against the God Clan to reclaim wouldn't exist anymore. At this realm, perhaps they could get into the sea domain of nihility to survive. However, the warriors under Immortal Realm would perish and become ashes. Tell us all the solutions you got, hissed Carlos. Minghao frowned and thought. He rose one hand and struck a strange light, which then quietly pierced to someplace far, far away. Shi Yan's heart suddenly had a vibe. The strange light Ming Hao had released seemed to fall into the middle of Shi Yan's inner world. He thought and found where Ming Hao's soul consciousness had gone. To Grace Mainland. Indeed, shortly after, Holy Beast Azure Dragon walked out of a light door Ming Hao had made. He was the sixth Immortal Realm expert coming to this area. Right when he arrived, Azure Dragon saw the worm erode. His face changed dramatically. An absolute beginning creature. Qing Xiao, long time no see, muttered Lei Di. Azure Dragon didn't care about him. He looked at the giant worm and looked terror-struck. Why is there an absolute beginning creature here? How do you know it's an absolute beginning creature? Asked Xian He. Well, it's a giant creature and I didn't find my heavenly monster tribe's aura from it. Of course, it is from the absolute beginning era. Azure Dragon looked at the others and lowered his voice. I've lived longer than any of you here. My understanding of this cosmos is deeper than you guys a little. There are some old stories I know. Stop talking nonsense. Ming Hao snorted impatiently. I invite you here to ask if you have any solution to deal with that thing. Azure Dragon looked at them and pondered for seconds. If we've reached third sky of Immortal Realm, perhaps we will have the power to fight it once. However, none of us have reached this realm yet. I'm afraid it's not easy to deal with. After talking, he suddenly turned to Shi Yan and screamed in surprise. And then, people remembered Shi Yan, the one who they had neglected for a long time. They looked at him because they didn't know why Azure Dragon sounded surprised. After a flash, Azure Dragon appeared by Shi Yan. He concentrated on Shi Yan to assess him. He looked even more astounded and cried, "He's getting an overall sublimation." Everybody was baffled. Azure Dragon was bewildered. Seeing people not get what he meant, he spoke in a different way. He's transforming in Bloodthirsty's path. It's a new life transformation in a new way. He's reaching the perfect state. It's a natural self-evolution that is similar to Ghost Hunter fusing with the blood of Immortal Demon Clan, Heavenly Monster Tribe, and Imperial Dark Tribe. It's the blood fusion to reach a higher form of life. Also, Shi Yan is using an unknown power to fix the flaws of his living form. He will turn into the most perfect form. Now the others understood it. They were all shocked as they could never imagine such things. Countless years had passed by and Bloodthirsty had been recognized as the strongest warrior. Except for his unknown, marvelous power Upanishad, it was because of his tenacious, domineering body. He was worshipped as the most perfect fighter. According to Ming Hao, Bloodthirsty was the combination of the four great creatures. He had the advantageous features of all four races. His physical flaws were mended, and his living form had almost reached perfection. Ghost Hunter was an alien who was the closest to Bloodthirsty. With the mix of bloodlines, his life form had reached a new height. However, at this moment, Azure Dragon was saying that Shi Yan was using a new method different from blood mixing to evolve his life form wholly. It seemed to be the first case ever in the past 100,000 years. So you mean that this kind of life seal transformation is to evolve from the immortal demon to some higher level creature? Xian He sounded shocked. In fact, he isn't a pureblood immortal demon. He just has the immortal demon blood in his body. Also, he has slowly transformed to become an immortal demon warrior. Ming Hao is still calm. I know his past like the back of my hand. His father comes from the Yang family, and the Yang family is the result of the relationship between an immortal demon precursor and a human. Thus, the Yang family had the immortal demon blood in their bodies. As their realm increases, they can generate immortal demon blood. Eventually, when they can replace their blood with the immortal demon blood, they can transform into the immortal demon body, the fighting form of the immortal demon warriors. Pausing for a while, Ming Hao continued, all the members of the Yang family are mixed blood between the immortal demon precursor and a human. It's the same in his case. The human blood is really weak, but it has the most magical fusing power. It can blend with almost any other blood. This is a very unique feature. As his realm increases, his life form enhances and triggers his power to transform into the immortal demon body. However, in nature, he still has streaks of human clan. Today, he's evolving to a higher life form. It's like when he is transformed into the immortal demon body. Anyway, it's a special method that we don't know yet. Ming Hao explained, his eyes astounded with emotions. Ming Hao has keen eyes. Holy Beast Azure Dragon gave a gentle nod. Shi Yin has fused with the Genesis Fruit, and his co-soul has fused with Grace Mainland. His life form is already complex and unpredictable. I can't see the causes. However, I know that after his life form finishes transforming, his progress of understanding the power Upanishads and the soul form will change altogether. The high-level creatures were born with advantages. It's similar to how the 4 great creatures are stronger than the other races and Bloodthirsty was stronger than us. I'm just afraid that his transformation speed won't catch up with the destructive speed of this universe, sneered DeCarlos. Hearing him, the others darkened their faces as they had to return to reality. Right at this moment, Shi Yin was quietly circulating energy in his acupuncture points to refine his entire body. He opened his eyes all of a sudden. He could hear what Azure Dragon and the others discussed. He knew his current condition. While he was still surprised, he found that the aura from the giant worm suddenly became thicker. He turned to see Wetterson and then discolored in fear. He yelled, "Wetterson!" Hearing him, people were startled when they saw Wetterson. Wetterson's stomach suddenly swelled up while he was releasing endless erosive energy. It looked like someone had just stuffed something into his body. A formidable energy that could destroy the universe gushed out from him like billions of volcanoes erupting at the same time. His terrifying power was enough to obliterate this world, indeed. Even Ming Hao, Azure Dragon, and Xian He discolored. They had a sudden fear of a new time coming. Wetterson was so intimidating at the moment. The massive worm was in its defending state, waiting for the clones. But now, it also recognized the danger. Just like an awakened hedgehog, its massive body shivered and released waves of bright light that could twist the bright-colored chaotic space currents. Countless beams of outer space streamers showered. Strong gusts, icicles, and chaotic, deadly fields swarmed all together. The turbulent space current seemed to turn into a massive furnace whose temperature continuously increased. The colossal worm moved and seized the chance when people were startled because of Wetterson. It tried to get rid of the confinement. That group of experts didn't know what had just happened to Wetterson. Seeing the worm trying to escape, they cheered up and used all of their power to seal it. They seemed to see hope now. Although Wetterson had exploded and was now a pulp of blood and flesh, he had paid with his life to urge the tremendous energy to attack the big worm. Even if it had balled its body to defend itself, it couldn't stand the power like the last glow of Wetterson's life. That energy was enough to destroy so many star areas at the same time. The worm attempted to flee because it was scared. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Wetterson's erosive energy overflowed on the massive worm. Thick, dark clouds fumed out of the worm's body again. Shi Yan's acupuncture points had gathered them all and turned them into the mysterious energy without refining. It was sent to his entire body. His body was still absorbing the energy greedily as if there was no limit. Slowly, he felt something strange in his body. Although he was still in the immortal demon body, the spikes on his elbows, shoulders, and knees had become more fearsome and sharper. They had grown longer too. He suddenly felt itchy on his back. The electric currents came with the energy gushing out of his acupuncture points, heading to his back. The bones, veins, and cells in his back absorbed it all. Crack, crack, crunchy sounds echoed from his spine. The skin on his back cracked. His bones suddenly grew longer. He had a terrifying change. A pair of wild, ferocious bone wings unexpectedly jutted out from the crack on his back. The bone wings were as transparent as jade, and they twinkled. The veins and tendons in the wings were connected directly with his god power ancient tree. They were like his arms that he could control smoothly and agilely. Flap, flap. As he thought, the bone wings flapped. The feeling of something becoming whole with his body arose in his mind. He was dumbstruck. The mysterious energy from the worm was taken in and the changes in his body continued. The fingernails on his hands also changed. They grew 1 meter long and they were as sharp as the sabers. The light reflected on them was cold and harsh, as if it could tear all creatures and cut their bodies open as easily as flipping a hand. Chapter 1342, Hui. Chapter 1342, Hui, a mythical venomous snake, also a kind of dragon, according to legends in the Han Dynasty. The strange transformation in his body had troubled Shi Yin at first. He found it hard to accept, and he even denied it instinctively. However, he quickly accepted this bizarre transformation. He even felt a little happy. He could feel that his overall competence was enhanced tremendously after that transformation. Every cell in his body was now filled with exploding power. His body could burst off in any minute. It was a feeling of having brimming energy. His acupuncture points continued to erupt that mysterious energy while his skeleton, veins, and tendons were absorbing it greedily. His fingernails became like sabers, and now he had a pair of bone wings on his back that made him fearsome. He looked like a warrior of heavenly monster tribe who had a humanoid body and a pair of dragon wings. The co-soul sinking in the incipient extent released some vague wisps of memories. It was like when a seal on the soul was lifted. Shi Yin suddenly had received a lot of knowledge. It was likely the memories of Grace Mainland in the co-soul. When he had fused with the origin, it had become part of his co-soul, but it was rusty ever since. It opened at a critical moment. And now, it was the critical moment, so the sealed memory was released. Shi Yin suddenly shouted and turned into a shooting light aiming at the giant worm. An extremely sharp aura shot out from his body and turned him into a cold sword that thrusted at the worm. This is its brain. It's called Hui. The other 11 worms are parts of its body. This one is the head, which has the weakest attacking ability. It's the source of the worm's intelligence. Once its body comes, no one can control it. While he was screaming, Shi Yin turned into a stream of brilliant stars that stabbed toward Hui the giant worm. Ming Hao and Xin He were bewildered. "Lift the seal," shouted Shi Yin. Then, the scorching flames expanded from that shooting light. Countless clusters of flames increased fast. It was the magical ability of the combined heaven flames. Ming Hao hesitated for a while, then opened a corner of his barrier. The wisps of souls scattered. Xian He and Lei Di released the soul consciousness to check, and they were astounded to find the tremendous energy fluctuating on Shi Yan's body. And when he spoke the name of the worm, they were moved. Just like what Ming Hao had done, they lifted a corner of their seal so as Shi Yin could get in. De Carlos and Frederick did the same. They made way for him, letting him pierce through the barriers to land on that giant worm. In their minds, Shi Yin looked a bit eccentric now. It was not only because of his appearance. It was also the fact that he knew that the name of the worm was Hui. They felt strange and somehow magical. They also knew that Shi Yin had the inheritance from Bloodthirsty and had fused with Grace Mainland's origin. He was the most magical person in this world. It was going to be hard to assess him with typical knowledge. Thus, they allowed Shi Yin to be bold. They wanted to see what kind of wave and wind he could rise this time. In front of many people, Shi Yin pierced through the barrier to reach Hui. The sharp fingernails of his hands sparkled coldly and smoothly stabbed into the worm's body. It was strange that the layer of bright yellow keratin that the super erosive energy couldn't melt was like torn fabric when Shi Yin thrust his long fingernails in it. A tear was made where a thick, yellow liquid was oozing out. De Carlos and Ming Hao were shocked. Each of them had tried every method they could to tear the body of the giant worm. They knew that it was very tough to break the defense of the worm. The bright yellow keratin armor could be compared to Bloodthirsty's body, which was almost unbreakable. They felt that their hands were tied as they had no other solution. Surprisingly, Shi Yan's long fingernails that suddenly grew was able to cut a large hole on the worm's body. They thought it was so strange and inexplicable. Swish! Shi Yin looked like he was possessed by some mighty god. His wings flapped behind his back while his cold sparkling fingernails continuously tore the worm. He had cut so many wounds on the massive worm. Hui shrieked in rage. Its giant body wildly convulsed and splashed the yellow substance. Countless clusters of heaven flames congregated on Shi Yan's body. It looked like he was sinking in a sea of fire. The heaven flame burned down all the splashes of yellow substance and protected Yin. At the same time, Wetterson's earth-corrosive energy came. His erosive energy could melt a little bit of the worm's armor. However, after Yin had cut its body many times, the erosive energy could get into its flesh and wound its core. Confine it. Don't let it escape. Ming Hao suddenly reacted. He understood Yin's plan. He shouted immediately. Hui had its faces redden as if Hui had just taken ecstasy. They released the power of the immortal realm experts ultimately. For the time being, the world seemed discolored with the void shaking, the mad dragons flying, and the blood sea boiling. Hui was an absolute beginning creature, a creature that was born in the earliest era of the world. It had endless abilities with eternal life. If they classified creatures, Hui would be the existence at the top of the food pyramid. It also had the highest living form. If they could kill such an existence to discover its secrets, they could directly break the principle that had created this world. Also, they could know what had happened in the absolute beginning era. Space, time, cosmos, power Upanishads, and energies had existed since a very early point in time. However, as they had developed, they had lost their original shapes. Some had even changed completely. What they looked like before, how the universe was formed, what the acme of the Great Path was, what they would become when they reached the ultimate level of their cultivation. Perhaps they could find all the answers from Hui. As they had a chance to kill Hui now, they were so excited. The blood in their body was boiling to urge their energy to the utmost. Spark, the elder of the God clan, was kept inside a meatball, which was also on the surface of the worm. At this moment, Spark's corpse suddenly moved. Spark closed eyes opened quietly and revealed a pair of lively eyes. His eyes rolled. Slowly, he gained color. The God Lord's shadow emerged in his pupils as if he was using Spark's eyes to observe the situation. Not many people knew that the one with the origin of the ancient continent could have many supernatural abilities. Haig was the one with the highest compatibility with the heaven flames among Yin, Audrey, and Songyun. He could easily gather the energy of ancient god continent to increase his power. After the God Lord had occupied Haig's body, the fusing progress with the flaming origin had finally reached the best condition. The God clan was born in ancient god continent. As the God Lord got the origin of the continent, he had become its master. It seemed like ancient god continent had become his incipient extent. After he had utterly fused with the heaven flames, he could control any member of the God clan with just one thought. As long as they got the God blood, no matter where they were, the God Lord could locate them and even possess them to get to that location precisely. It was the magical power that only someone fully fused with the flaming origin could have. Yin, Audrey, and Songyun still needed to work a lot to reach such a level. Also, even if they could reach that level, without the cultivation base like the God Lord, they couldn't do that. Now, the God Lord was standing on the God zenith of ancient God continent, but he was able to use the God blood that never disappeared in Spark's body to observe everything in this area. Whether it was Yin, Ming Hao, or De Carlos, they couldn't imagine that the God Lord was using a chunk of meat on Huey's body to observe the situation here. They didn't know that the God Lord could use Spark's body to come here in just a blink of an eye. Tsunami star. Tianxia's eyes were cold and dark. He was sitting cross-legged above the pond. An unknown energy twirled around him. His face twisted as if he had to endure some terrible pain. The green veins bulged on his forehead and made his handsome face fearsome. A worm mark emerged on his glabella. It looked like a real worm living between his two eyebrows. It was moving, though. The wisps of memories and thoughts came out of the seal, pouring into his brain. Tianxia was receiving something quietly. A long time afterward, he resumed. The worm mark on his forehead faded. He had concealed it. He recovered his normal condition. His face kept the usual smile. After a flash, he reappeared in the secret chamber where Ling Xiang, Caesar, and Lorraine were gathering. He said casually, "I'm cultivating a special technique. Sometimes, I will fall into hallucination. I need to quiet down to adjust a little. I'm sorry I made you wait. Inside the secret chamber, Ling Xiang, Caesar, and Lorraine didn't know what was happening out there. They didn't know the earth-shaking commotion in the 11-star areas. They were polite when they told him, "It's all right." Of course, they didn't know that while they were waiting for Tianxia underwent some marvelous changes. They didn't know that Tianxia had secretly ordered his subordinates to destroy the sea territories in the 11-star areas. He had directly guided the giant worms to create a catastrophe there. "I have a presumptuous request," said Tianxia seriously. Ling Xiang and the others wore stern faces and focused on him to see what he wanted to do. "I want all of you to help me," Tianxia chuckled. A strange, evil light swirled in his eyes. "What do you want?" Ling Xiang was surprised. "I want to eat you," said Tianxia. While Ling Xiang, Caesar, and Lorraine were dumbstruck, billions of 7-colored lights shot out from Tianxia's body like rainbows. They were actually bright, colored ropes, and they tied down the other 3. Tianxia swayed, and a cold, sinister wisp of soul consciousness moved through the ropes to enter the other 3's brains. They were shaken hard as they were filled with horror. However, before they could scream, the rainbow ropes had squeezed them and pulled them toward him. Crack, crack. Shortly after, the sounds of chewing bones that could raise the hair on people's bodies arose in that secret chamber. The leaders of the 1,000 Fantasy sect, the Broken Hall, and the Heaven River Temple had come to the end of their lives before they could even screech. Chapter 1343, Godlord. Chapter 1343, Godlord. Hui's massive body had countless cuts where a pungent, sticky yellow fluid was oozing. Wetterson's body ballooned strangely as if he was about to explode. People could even see the fine, gruesome cracks on his belly. A brutal, murderous aura as if someone wanted to destroy the whole world emitted from his stomach. That murderous aura urged his life energy and consumed his soul to trigger all of his energy. Everybody could see that Wetterson's explosion would result in him paying with his life. No one really cared about his life. Ming Hao and Xian He were waiting until Hui's massive body eroded and its defense was eliminated. That time would be the best chance for them to seize the spoils. The body of the giant worm was decaying from the inside. The thick smoke was like ink that emitted more furiously. Shi Yan's acupuncture points sucked them all and increased the power of his body and soul. Suddenly, Shi Yan suddenly stopped destroying Hui's body. He halted and stood on its body. The magical feeling when the soul sublimated flooded his mind. His acupuncture points, tendons, and god power ancient tree had become whole with a subtle connection. The branches of the ancient tree connected with his veins, and his veins connected to the acupuncture points. The energy gushing out of the acupuncture points flowed through the veins and poured into his lower abdomen. God power ancient tree was bright and crystal clear grew again. A warm current washed his brain and entered his sea of consciousness. The comfortable feeling that nothing could compare to filled his soul altar. The dregs and contaminations in his soul altar were washed away by the clear, warm current. His soul altar was clean now. In that short moment, his soul altar had become a beautiful chunk of flawless jade. It was transparent and sparkling. It hid the endless marvelous abilities. He suddenly understood that his cognition of space, star, and death and life power Upanishads had become much more profound. It was like a young, naive teenager who opened his mind and became witty smart. While his thought changed, the warm currents had washed his soul altar. The energies of his power Upanishads shot fast and moved around. Waves of marvelous, inexplicable understanding reflected in his mind and became more profound. Shi Yan felt like he was flying free in the fountainhead of power Upanishads to learn the most magical powers. It was the sublimation of the soul altar and the next development of the realm. Unexpectedly, he had advanced directly from second sky to third sky of incipient god realm. It was an incredible breakthrough. He stood there in a daze, feeling the subtle changes of his body, soul altar, and soul. His eyes suddenly had magical light. He gathered himself together to observe the massive worm underneath. His face changed abruptly. At the direction he was watching, he saw a pair of eyes that shouldn't open at this moment. That pair of eyes belonged to Spark. Spark was dead. He had checked carefully and found that Spark's life magnetic field had vanished and left nothing. He was dead. How could he open his eyes now? It was so strange. His first thought was that Hui had borrowed Spark's body to wiggle the last time. However, looking in those eyes for seconds, he objected that possibility. It was because the emotion in Spark's eyes didn't match Hui's style of no emotion at all. The look from those eyes was profound and archaic with gleams of teasing and cold looks, as if it was a hunter waiting for its prey to enter the trap. Yin felt insecure. More strangely, that pair of eyes were looking at him in the eyes without fear or attempts to avoid eye contact. Apparently, that person wasn't afraid of his discovery. Oh no, something is wrong. He had a bad premonition. Those eyes were familiar. He tried to force his brain to think. Shortly after, the co-soul emerged from the incipient extent and entered the soul altar. When he looked at those eyes again, he was shocked. He couldn't help but hiss, Hague. The four ancient continents, Grace Mainland, God-blessed Mainland, Ancient God Continent, and Ancient Demon Continent, had a subtle connection. As Yin had fused with Grace Mainland, he could feel the special aura that only Hague had. It was a special aura that only the ancient continents had, and the ones of his kind could capture that faint aura. It was the soul streak after fusing with the origin that they couldn't conceal. After his shouting, the eyes were surprised and looked at him. The shades of emotion in those eyes changed continuously. A strong, insecure feeling arose in his heart. He didn't wait to see the eyes changing and turning into a bunch of starlights. He used his space power Upanishad to pierce through layers of barriers, leaving Hui's body. Swish! He steadied his body by Holy Beast Azure Dragon. With a heavy countenance, he cried, Spark is inside that worm. His eyes open. They belong to Hague. I can feel the distinct aura from him. Hague! Minghao shook his head. Maybe you're wrong. Hague doesn't exist anymore. He's dead. Dead? Yin was surprised. He couldn't believe it. Impossible. That person has the aura of Ancient God Continent's origin. I'm fused with Grace Mainland's origin. How can I be wrong about this? Minghao was surprised at first. He was shocked, his face extremely somber. You said he has the aura of Ancient God Continent's origin? Exactly. Minghao, He, Azure Dragon, and DeCarlos became dark and grimaced. They looked at Hui's body as if they were facing the biggest enemy. Brian, you're here. Why are you hiding your head but showing your tail? Minghao shouted ear-piercingly. When they heard the name Brian, Lady and Frederick discolored in fear as if they saw ghosts in daylight. The excitement they had subsided as if someone had poured a bucket of cold water on them. Their joy was extinguished. Why is he here? Frederick's pale face became paler. It wasn't that he was afraid. It was the sign of ultimately compressing his energy. He used his best power. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Lightning strikes as big as a giant python shot out from Azure Dragon's body, creating a sea of thunder and lightning. The deadly lightning energy was enough to destroy the world, stirring the chaotic space current and splashing the strange but marvelous light. When they dealt with Hui, they didn't look as solemn as they did right now. They all looked in the direction Yin had pointed. Minghao looked at Wetterson, his face dark. I understand why Wetterson's energy suddenly rocketed. It turns out that you've given him fire. It seems like you've used all the pieces of our master's remains that your god clan has gathered in the past thousands of years, right? Crack! A meat lump at the surface of Hui's body exploded. The yellow fluid splashed. Holy light rolled out torrentially and slowly condensed into Hague. Swish! He emerged from the open slit on Spark's body. He looked at Minghao's group and spoke coldly and indifferently. After Bloodthirsty fell, you guys have changed a lot. You don't have the spirit from that year. I've been watching you for a long time. I didn't expect that you guys wouldn't have the guts to attack the absolute beginning creature directly. No wonder why you guys have advanced only one more level after 10,000 years. If I didn't get severely hurt and my body wasn't destroyed, I think I would have broken this world and escaped by today, just like how Bloodthirsty had traveled freely in the sea domain of nihility. While he was talking, his body was like a precious crystal that reflected billions of dazzling light beams. Those lights were layering upon each other like sharp swords, stabbing every corner of this space. Each of the beams had life energy as if they were clones of his soul. Puff, puff, puff. The beams of light shot everywhere. Hui was next to him, so it received most of the attack. His light stabbed through the yellow keratin. The defense that even the corrosion power Upanishad couldn't melt was pierced through easily. He was the second person who could break Hui's body defense. Different from Shi Yin, Brian didn't use any weapon. He was just using the light swords created by his god power to hurt the absolute beginning creature. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The blinding lights were shot with essence of his power Upanishad. Xin He, Ming Hao, and the others had to focus on dealing with this light attack. They darkened their faces and built barriers to defend themselves. Shi Yin wasn't an exception. He seemed to see the posture of the first-generation precursor of the God Clan. When he was on Desolate, he had fused with the star-incipient extent of that god precursor. He got a deep attainment of that precursor of the realm. Today, the God Lord released his power Upanishad. Shi Yin pulled himself together to observe and comprehend. He found that the God Lord's attainment of light power Upanishad had surpassed that precursor of 100,000 years ago. He was truly the strongest existence of the God Clan ever. Sea of vanishing stars. Shi Yin was anxious. He urged his god power and felt happy. The circulating speed of his god power was several times faster than in the past. It wasn't that he had broken through the next realm, but it was that his tendons, veins, blood, and even his cells had transformed to a deep level. It was his life transformation. Within a thought, a sea of stars emerged in front of him. It looked dreamy like the moon reflecting on the water. However, it changed continuously from clear to vague from time to time. The God Lord's light attacks came and were lost in the sea of stars that Shi Yin had created. They were never going to escape that maze to attack Shi Yin's real body. It was the supernatural ability that Shi Yin got after fusing his star and space power Upanishads. It was the transformation of the realm when he got a flash of recognition. Oh! The God Lord let out a low cry, his deep eyes gazing at Shi Yin. He changed his visage and laughed with ease and a natural poise. All right, I will take your soul first and fuse with Grace Mainland's origin then. His body swayed and crossed spaces to land on the sea of stars that Shi Yin had projected. At the same time, a beam of blood shot out from Wetterson's body. That beam of blood was like a key that revolved in the void. That blood changed again and turned into a window. Silhouettes got through the window. Carefree, light, easygoing, and divine martial, the four great heavenly kings arrived, followed by Feng Zhu, buyers, the elders of the God Clan, and the heads of the 12 families. They hovered by Wetterson. Magically, the erosive energy that Wetterson was releasing didn't affect them. It was because the blinding beams of light had affected Wetterson's deadly field and weakened the erosive power. Those beams of light came from the God Lord. He had shot those light to frighten Ming Hao and Xin He, but most of all, they were to protect Carefree and the others. Chapter 1344, Soul Congregating. Chapter 1344, Soul Congregating _ The God Lord suddenly came across the sky and used his supernatural power to bring a crowd of God experts to this area. For the time being, so many God experts gathered around the giant worm Hui. Most of them were at incipient God realm. They were the peerless warriors, including members of the Elder Committee and the chiefs of the 12 families. To fight Hui, the God Lord had mobilized all the warriors of his elite force. Ming Hao and Xin He were stern. Apparently, they were afraid of the God Lord. As soon as they saw him appear, they became cautious and urged their power Upanishad to the utmost. They were prepared for a bloody battle. Everyone expected that the battle between the bloodthirsty force and the God Clan would happen in Ancient God Continent, Ancient Demon Continent, Grace Mainland, or any other star area. However, it took place right at the chaotic space current. Because of Hui, The battle that shouldn't happen was forced to take place before an ideal time. Actually, the God Lord still needed a lot of energy and time to recover his original power. Ming Hao, Xin He, and the others hadn't prepared completely. This battle should have been postponed. However, the inevitable occurred today. The God Lord was like a blinding sun. Magnificent lights radiated dazzlingly from his body. The holy light rolled torrentially with an undying soul spirit, shooting at every direction. Shi Yin had unknowingly entered third sky of incipient God realm, and his power Upanishads had sublimated. His star and space power Upanishads had preliminarily fused. Now, it showed a marvel that nothing could compare to. The sea of stars in front of him was both real and dreamy. It changed continuously like the reflection of the moon on the water. The bunch of light beams that the God Lord had shot was covered by the fantasy incipient extent, but they couldn't harm Shi Yan's real body. He smiled faintly and gave a surprised scream. Then, he considered Shi Yan his primary target, stepping on the void to approach him. Shi Yan cursed him inwardly. His soul now received terrifying pressure. When the God Lord was about to reach him, he felt so heavy as if his soul altar was about to smash. He was frightened as he got to know the God Lord's intimidation. He had just reached third sky of incipient God realm, but he believed that if he fought Spark at the false immortal realm, he would defeat him easily. Shi Yin could even manage to fight first sky of immortal realm experts like Caesar, Lorraine, or Ling Xiang once. However, he couldn't face the God Lord. The one who was severely hurt had to use Haig's body to resurrect and hadn't recovered half of his power yet. Shi Yin felt anxious and restless, as if he was facing a wild beast from the immemorial time. His soul was intimidated. As you also got the ancient continent's origin, you should get its magical features. It's called Hui, a creature from the absolute beginning era like Desolate. They are from a very ancient time. This archaic living being has many marvelous things. However, I can't understand it completely. Perhaps it will be easier if I get your origin. The God Lord was talking casually. When he spoke to Shi Yin, his face looked magically tender. However, he had entered that sea of vanishing stars that Shi Yin had built in just a blink of an eye. The sea of vanishing star was the ability of space and star power Upanishads. It had connected directly to his incipient extent. While his soul consciousness changed, the sea of stars seemed to vanish. It's an interesting ability of your power Upanishads, smiled the God Lord. A chunk of bright light emitted from his palm. Marvelously, that light had many magical power Upanishads. The auras of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, ice, lightning, and electric, and wind emerged at once inside the chunk of light in his hand. Boom, boom. The sea of stars that Shi Yin had created melted like snow under that light. Shi Yin was exposed. You shouldn't fuse with the origin. It's your luck, but also your calamity. Maybe I will give you room to grow to give bloodthirsty face. However, when you got the power bloodthirsty controlled, you became a person I had to kill. It's too bad. The God Lord looked regretful. He sighed, raising one hand and attempting to capture Shi Yin. Puff! Shi Yin looked cold, his eyes crimson. He spurted blood. That blood was a scorching flame burning fierily. His energy rocketed and urged his spirit, chi, and soul. Boom! His brain was shaken as if his life energy was completely triggered. His cells, hair, flesh, and bones seemed to have life. The explosions echoed abruptly inside his body. His body cracked and a fierce desire of killing arose in his head. The thick murderous aura swam over. Under death power Upanishad, it turned into a massive, bloody hand as big as an imposing mountain. The giant hand was as red as if it was made of blood. It reached for the God Lord. As it was about to touch the God Lord, vigorous life energy was sent out of the fingertips of the giant hand. That vitality didn't weaken the deadly hand. It had enhanced the hand's intimidation. The energy fluctuating from the bloody hand was enough to break a life star. Thud! The massive hand slapped the God Lord like a stone ball hitting a big mountain. The God Lord stood imposingly. However, He looked surprised. Eyeing Shi Yin for a while, he said, "It seems that Xian He has given you all the essence of his power Upanishad. Although the power of your death Upanishad isn't as excellent as Xian He's, it isn't bad." He was skeptical. Shi Yan's performance today didn't match the intelligence that the Elder Committee had told him. They said that Shi Yin was at first sky of incipient God realm. They said that he had mastered space, star, and death and life power Upanishad. However, his power Upanishads hadn't fused with each other yet. They told him that he was still in the stage of understanding his power, so he was still far away from the fusing stage. However, at this moment, Shi Yin was obviously at third sky of incipient God realm, and his fusion of space and star power Upanishads wasn't bad. He had also fused death and life power Upanishads smoothly. The conflicting information confused the Godlord. He didn't know that all of these were the merit of the mysterious energy from Hui. That energy was magical. It did not only help Shi Yin reach third sky of incipient God realm, but it also increased the fusion speed of his power Upanishad. Shi Yin could blend the special abilities of his power Upanishads to strike with much more strong attacks. All of these achievements were generated recently. Thus, the Godlord's hand was interrupted midway. He couldn't grab Shi Yin to destroy him directly. He had missed the best chance, because right when he wanted to attack one more time, in the middle of the turbulent space current, countless beautiful, heavenly doors emerged. Then, countless Ming Hao walked out of those doors. Like shadows, they came and merged with Ming Hao's host body. The soul control power Upanishad had divided the soul into millions of wisps. After each wisp was detached, the user's power was reduced by a little bit. The more clones he created, the weaker they individually were. It was the principle of the world that no one could change. Of course, Ming Hao couldn't do that either. However, as Brian the Godlord had come, Ming Hao knew that it was going to be very serious. He decided to gather all the clones of his soul that were scattered in many star areas, all fused into one. Right when the Godlord wanted to attack one more time, Ming Hao moved to Shi Yin instantly like a wisp of a soul. His eyes were cold and dark as he said, "Brian, I'm your opponent. Actually, I don't want to battle you now, but as you can't wait, I have to fight you." As Ming Hao was talking, more and more silhouettes came and merged with him. There were more than several hundreds of them. His aura became more intimidating and his realm was changing. "Ming Hao, I can't believe that you," De Carlos cried, his face astounded as if it was the first time he knew Ming Hao. Aside from him, Xian He, Frederick, Azure Dragon, and Lei Di were also baffled. They were in disbelief. After the Godlord had come here, he always looked calm and relaxed. Now, he changed his face when he looked at Ming Hao having many clones merging continuously. Ming Hao's body was dark like a sinister ghost. He gave people a magical feeling of something real and false at the same time. It was inexplicable indeed. He was hovering there, but people had a feeling that he didn't exist. "You are worthy of your reputation as the leader of the Cortege of Eight. After 10,000 years, Xian He and Frederick have made only one step further, but you progressed 2 steps. You've reached third sky of a mortal realm. No wonder you dare to declare war against our clan. It turns out that you have the same realm as mine." The Godlord lowered his voice. "Originally, I didn't want to take action so early. However, you couldn't wait. Brian, I've planned each step to start a war against your clan to give you time to recover. I wanted to fight against you when you got your third sky of immortal realm cultivation base back. You're too fast," Ming Hao sighed. Before his soul congregated, it was like he was encountering the strongest enemy. He had to be very cautious. However, when countless clones of his soul returned, his power had reached third sky of a mortal realm. He now could relax and show his arrogant and proud bearings without fear. Third sky of a mortal realm was the ultimate realm of power Upanishad in the vast universe. It was the real ultimate existence. In the crowd of billions of people, the warriors at this realm could be counted with just the fingers of one hand. Currently, there were 2 warriors at such a realm, the Godlord and Ming Hao. However, the Godlord hadn't recovered yet. Compared to Ming Hao, who had accumulated for 10,000 years apparently, The God Lord was in a disadvantageous situation. This point could be seen from ladies and Azure Dragon's cheered-up faces, as well as the fear on the faces of the God Clan experts. Everybody turned to the God Lord to see how he would deal with this. Strangely, the God Lord looked a little surprised. Then, he pulled himself together and laughed. Ming Hao, you're wrong. My current power is equal to yours. If I recover fully, you don't have even a small chance of winning against me. After 10,000 years, although my body was destroyed, my soul hasn't stayed still. After 10,000 years, you've entered third sky of a mortal realm. But do you know what I am at? Listening to him, the members of the God Clan cheered up and their eyes brightened. Ming Hao contemplated for a while and then nodded. He didn't protest or look suspicious. Perhaps you're right. 11 clones of Hui will come soon. We should have a winner before that. The God Lord frowned. We shouldn't waste more time. That's what I think, said Ming Hao. Chapter 1345, New Power. Chapter 1345, New Power, _. The God Lord said they shouldn't waste time, and he actually did that. Almost instantly, a halo that was even brighter than the sun radiated from his body. That light was like the mixed energy of many power Upanishads including metal, wood, water, fire, earth, lightning and electric, wind, and ice. They were chained by the light power Upanishad, making the God Lord a massive chunk of light. His body became as dazzling as a diamond under the intense light. The flow of strong light with the God Lord's soul consciousness shot towards Ming Hao like a shower of swords. Ming Hao's eyes were bluish-green. While his power was changing, his ghostly body, which the souls had already merged and twisted, caused the space around him to fiercely collapse as if he was breaking it. The wisps of soul flew out of his body, creating the form of a soul altar. However, it was shadowy and vague. A terrifying magnetic field that could shake souls came from the soul altar that Ming Hao had just condensed. The host souls of people around him shivered, as if some force had absorbed them and made them quivering and edgy. Shi Yin wasn't an exception. He could feel his host soul and co-soul get attracted by Ming Hao's soul altar. They seemed to want to leave him and sink into Ming Hao's soul altar. That feeling was so horrible. It was like his soul wasn't his anymore. Someone had robbed his soul and enslaved it. It was Ming Hao's soul control power Upanishad. Once he released his power, all the souls were going to be affected. Everybody knew that they weren't Ming Hao's target. They were just affected by the shockwaves. Even so, they couldn't endure it. Their faces were filled with fear as they tried to move to the opposite direction. The members of the God Clan became more irritated. They changed their faces slightly, moving far away from him. Except for the 4 heavenly kings. The 4 heavenly kings had reached second sky of a mortal realm. Of course, their realms were profound and their power was exquisite. Their souls wouldn't be affected. However, the chiefs of the 12 families and the elders of the Elder Committee looked grimaced. They hurried to move away. The dazzling lights that the God Clan released shot towards Ming Hao's soul altar, but they melted down and vanished. After 10,000 years, at least the Cortege of 8 has someone like you, Ming Hao. You're qualified to fight against me once. Brian the God Lord looked happy. He chuckled. After a flash, he came to the void above Hui and said, "We should move further away to fight. Then, we won't affect your people and my people." Although his wounds hadn't recovered fully, at his third sky of a mortal realm, everybody was going to suffer if he used his abilities. That immense, holy light carried the marvelous of many power Upanishads. Even Xian He and Frederick acted like they were facing top enemies. They had to focus on dealing with the bunch of light that Brian had struck. Lady, Azure Dragon, and De Carlos had to spare their energy to resist pressure from the God Lord. Although it wasn't so much that they couldn't endure it, it was so annoying that they couldn't ease their minds. Just like that, the soul control power Upanishad that Ming Hao had released also affected everybody's soul. The warriors of the 12 families and the elders felt so irritated. Thus, the battle between the other two had held them back as they had to defend the shockwaves from their attacks. It's good then. Ming Hao turned into a dim light. dragging his soul altar and disappearing in the direction the Godlord had just gone. The two of them were hovering above Hui, but when the others lifted their heads to look, they had a strange feeling that they were looking through layers of light curtains to see the reflection on the lake. They all felt as if they were watching something unreal. It seemed like the Godlord and Ming Hao weren't in the same world with them, but in a magical world that they had created within their territory. The Godlord was in a world of dazzling light with moving stars, icy mist, a sea of fire, the great earth with forests, all things a normal world should have. Ming Hao's world was dark and deep with some shadowy clusters like ghosts and layers of reflecting spaces. It looked like he had countless pieces of different worlds mending together in his own world. His figure disappeared and moved through the shattered worlds so that people could never catch him. After their realm reached a specific level, warriors had supernatural power like the mighty creator. They could create a world from nothing. A world that suited their power. Upanishads could promote their supernatural power to the utmost. It was actually a performance of the divine domain at the highest level. For example, warriors cultivating ice power. Upanishad could use the cold energy to create a world of snow where he could use the cold energy to the deepest level. Right now, the two extraordinary experts, the Godlord and Ming Hao, were creating worlds most suitable to their power. Upanishads. Their worlds were some kind of modification to the real world, and they weren't just to fight. When they were fighting, the others wore somber faces as they forgot everything else just to concentrate on the two of them. Their audience consisted of peerless warriors in this vast cosmos. In their fields of expertise, they were much more outstanding than others. The lowest realm that a warrior in this group had was second sky of incipient god realm, and many of them were at the false immortal realm or immortal realm. The battle between the Godlord and Ming Hao was a top battle that they could only watch once in their lives. Through the deathmatch between the experts, they could widen their knowledge and grasp their new understanding of power Upanishads, which would help them break through again. Thus, they even stopped caring about Hui at this moment. Only one warrior didn't pay too much attention to the battle between the Godlord and Ming Hao. It was Shi Yin. At this moment, Shi Yin was still immersed in the most marvelous state he had ever been. He didn't want to get out of it. The mysterious energy from Hui was moving inside his body and seeping into his god power ancient tree, skeleton, tendons, blood, cells, and even his hair. Gradually, he found a really magnificent phenomenon. His body became transparent. His soul altar and body were refined, and they had boosted to third sky of incipient god realm. His understanding of power Upanishads was greatly enhanced, which was even changing his soul altar structure at the moment. His sea of consciousness had become endless. His soul consciousness under that energy's effect seemed to become a brand new energy. His sea of consciousness, just like what happened to his god power ancient tree, had become another fountainhead of energy. This kind of transformation in his soul consciousness had brimmed his energy, which made him shiver and thrill. Slowly, he understood what was happening to him. The soul consciousness was also a sort of energy. However, this energy was used to sense and check things. It couldn't become a powerful attack. For example, the god power could smash a mountain and collapse it, and the erosive power could even melt down an entire mountain. However, the soul consciousness could be like the wind that gets through cracks in a mountain to survey even the smallest corner inside the mountain. The soul consciousness couldn't break the mountain directly. It was common knowledge and also the typical principle of power. However, as his sea of consciousness and soul consciousness were transforming, Shi Yin had a marvelous feeling that his soul consciousness could even move a mountain or fill up the sea. He could feel that his current soul consciousness had eternal abilities. While his soul consciousness was changing, he suddenly had a wonderful feeling that there was a kind of incomparably enormous energy in this chaotic space basin. That kind of energy was immensely abundant here, but he couldn't see or touch it. But now, he could use his soul consciousness to see it. When he got such an incredible feeling, he suddenly found that his body was also affected when his sea of consciousness changed. His body seemed to turn into nothing directly. His heart twitched. When he urged the god power ancient tree, his body resumed its normal condition and became visible. He was dumbstruck for a long time. Afterward, his eyes showed his fantastic thrill. Apparently, when his body was invisible, it was similar to the ability that the bloodthirsties remains had. Rumors said that Bloodthirsty controlled a mysterious power that only he understood in the past 10,000 years. The Godlord, Ling Xiang, Caesar, Lorraine had been laboriously seeking this power for so many years in vain. The power he had just grasped seemed to be that mysterious power. This power came from the absolute beginning creature. Previously, Hui had tried to tempt him to help it escape. The price was that it would give him its magical power. Yin didn't think that Hui knew its marvelous power. The transformation of his sea of consciousness, body, and soul altar was because his devouring power Upanishad had swallowed and converted the energy from that absolute beginning creature. His thrill didn't last long. Shortly after, Yin woke up and he found that he couldn't take in more energy from Hui. At the same time, he found that Wetterson had used up his life energy. His face was ash-gray, as he didn't have any beam of erosive energy in his body. He quietly sank into the chaotic space current. Like a shooting star, he sparked and then vanished in the end. Yin looked at Wetterson sinking, showing regret and sighing. Wetterson's life ended like a nova. He bloomed dazzlingly before Ming Hao and Godlord had joined hands to bury him. Ming Hao gave him Bloodthirsty's remains to swallow. The Godlord had used a secret technique to put the Bloodthirsty's remains into his stomach. He had used his life energy to burn and trigger the energy in Bloodthirsty's remains to wound Hui. Both Ming Hao and the Godlord knew that with his cultivation base, Wetterson couldn't endure it for a long time. However, no one cared about his death or life. To achieve their purpose and benefit from Hui, they chose to sacrifice Wetterson. Wetterson was gone now. The Godlord and Ming Hao didn't get the power from Hui. They had accidentally helped Yin transform his life form and receive that mysterious power. Man proposes, God disposes. They didn't know that while they were wrestling and using their lives, Yin had finished accumulating power and transforming. Chapter 1346, Hui Counterattacks. Chapter 1346, Hui Counterattacks, _ Deep inside the chaotic space basin, Brian the Godlord and Ming Hao were fighting fiercely in the void above Hui. However, the two of them were in layers of hallucination. The warriors in this area focused on watching them, but they couldn't see anything clearly. The Godlord and Ming Hao were like reflections in the water. The others didn't notice that Wetterson had consumed all of his energy, falling and disappearing into the darkness. Also, no one had noticed that Yin was like a floating shadow that disappeared and reappeared continuously. Without Wetterson's erosive energy attack, Hui had a bright yellow keratin defense that covered its body one more time. Obviously, it wasn't in good condition. The giant worm moved and twitched as if it was hurt severely. And it was really hurt. The giant worm had emitted too much of its life energy. After the erosive energy had worn out its energy, Yin had absorbed it all and turned into nutrients that boosted his life form. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Abruptly, many clusters of smokes emitted from Hui. Unpredictable, magical energy fluctuations burst out from its body. Ordinary people couldn't recognize that energy or sense it. It seemed to be invisible. However, Yin could see it clearly. The energy from Hui had triggered some sort of unknown energy that presented everywhere in this chaotic space current and created a deep vortex in the void. That vortex seemed to function as a space passage that could teleport the worm's gigantic body in just a blink of an eye. It wanted to dodge the danger. DeCarlo suddenly cried. As his space power Upanishad was extremely profound, in spite of being able to sense the marvelous energy from Hui, he could still sense the uncommon commotion of space. He was frightened as he screamed, "It's not normal at all." Hearing him, the experts who were concentrating on the battle between the Godlord and Ming Hao noticed his panic. They then found that Wetterson had already disappeared and freed Hui from its confinement. The worm wanted to run away now. What should they do? Those experts had apparently considered Hui as the meat on their plate. They had been trying laboriously for a long time and now they could achieve what they had yearned for. How could they let it seize the chance to escape? Tacitly, they exchanged looks and all of them took action. Magnificent powers and incipient extents emerged and swarmed towards the giant body of Hui like layers of spider webs. Quickly, they had set dozens of binding layers on Hui. However, without Wetterson's erosive energy, their layers of confinement couldn't really hurt Hui. After Hui had tried its best to defend, its energy rocketed one more time, its life energy more tremendous. It was like a miracle. Shi Yin pulled himself together and observed. He had a strange but marvelous feeling. After the transformation, his soul consciousness was like his heavenly eye. He now could see the truth that ordinary people could never be able to peep. In his vision, Hui was like a powerful magnetic field. Waves of light emitted from its body and attracted strange energies in the turbulent space current. Those sorts of energy couldn't be observed with naked eyes or an ordinary soul consciousness. However, after Shi Yan's sea of consciousness had transformed, his soul consciousness had changed magically. That's how he could grasp the existence of those energies. Hui was gathering energy in the space current to enhance his power to get rid of the warrior's seals and confinements. However, Shi Yin was frightened that perhaps no one here could stop Hui. Wetterson was the only one who could do that. However, he was gone because he had used up his life energy. He had to remind the others. However, at this moment, Ziyao's voice suddenly arose in his head. You really want me to die? Ziyao's graceful body appeared mildly like a small on Hui's back. This time, she looked very different. Her eyes had a complex compassion and affection that only sentimental people could have. She didn't look cold and heartless as she appeared previously. She looked at Shi Yin, her face weak. Shi Yin, I don't want to hurt you. I just want to recover so I can return to the sea domain of nihility immediately. Among the people here, you're the most special. I hope that you won't stand against me in every aspect. Shi Yin was bewildered. He couldn't distinguish if Ziyao was now herself, or if she had completely fused with Hui. He couldn't make up his mind and frowned in a daze. He was a little panicked too. He wanted to assume that this Ziyao wasn't herself this time either. However, he didn't know why from the shades of emotion on her face, her voice, and her little moves. Shi Yin vaguely felt that Ziyao currently had part of her soul and consciousness. I still remembered the first time I met you. The warriors of the Underworld League imprisoned you. At that time, I already knew that you weren't ordinary. Before we could return to glorious Amethyst Star, we were trapped in Solar Star Exploding Fragment Field. Katua was after us. We have experienced many events together. I remember all of the details. Ziyao looked at him in the eyes and softly narrated their stories. She looked sad, though. I woke up. I know I'm now a wisp of its soul, a part of it. It has released me to understand the magical world of Desolate. I know I'm pathetic. I also know that if it doesn't exist, I will vanish altogether. Shi Yin was stunned as he looked at Ziyao in the distance. He listened to her talking, but he didn't say anything. He didn't say anything in the end. Without his reminder, people wouldn't be able to know what happened to Hui now. Shi Yin could see a small dot flash under Hui. He knew he had caught a glimpse of something disappearing into Hui's body. All of a sudden, the sincere affection on Ziyao's face faded. She resumed her indifferent, cold visage. Her line of sight switched from Shi Yin to Xian He and the god experts, her eyes very cold. Shi Yin became alert. His face changed as fear flooded him. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Countless outer space streamers began to seethe terrifyingly. Many kinds of energy became furious like collapsing mountains or an exploding planet. The clusters of red light rolled wildly and moved around in this void. Just like so many beautiful fiery eyes, they released evil energy that frightened souls. Naked eyes couldn't see this kind of energy. Only experts at the immortal realm could use their soul consciousness to catch a glimpse of it. It's that power. Carefree was shaken. He screamed in thrill. Divine Marshal, Easygoing, and Light were also frightened. They seemed to recall something very horrible, and they felt so chilled. It's the power that Master controlled, hissed Xian He. Frederick's eyes brightened. Right. It's the power that our Master controlled. Ming Hao said that Master got that power from the absolute beginning creature. Thus, only absolute beginning creatures understand it. It seems like Ming Hao is correct again. Puff, puff, puff. Some elders of the God Clan's Elder Committee couldn't even shriek before their bodies shivered and their life magnetic field vanished. Most people didn't know what had just happened. Only Immortal Realm experts could vaguely feel something magical. Also, only one person in this area knew the reason. It was Shi Yin. After his soul consciousness transformed, it had become as sensitive as the heavenly eye. He could see that mysterious energy expand and seep into the heads of those elders, breaking their soul altar directly and leading to the end of their host souls. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The sticky tendons like tentacles shot out from Hui's body, coiled the dead corpses, and pulled them toward it. As Hui wasn't tied by Wetterson's erosive energy, and as Shi Yin was distracted and didn't remind the others, it seemed to finish some transformation. It gathered a shadow into the body, and its power increased rapidly. It could release a mysterious power under the given confining circumstance. It was the first wave of its large-scale counterattack. At the same time, people heard murmuring noises coming from pretty far away. Everybody discolored in fright. Xian He and DeCarlos were gingerly. They looked extremely stern and insecure. How could its 11 clones come here that quickly? It shouldn't be like that. Xian He looked at DeCarlos. DeCarlos grimaced and said bitterly, I don't know. It seems to have increased its power instantly, which also makes the clones move faster. As they were talking in the chaotic space basin that their eyes couldn't reach, 11 worms bigger than the life stars were moving with their surging life magnetic fields like a great ocean. All were heading to their location. They moved in the space current like a big boat cruising the sea and splashing waves of space, which caused a lot of explosions. They made the space current seem to shatter everywhere they went close to. The experts always had a good premonition. They now felt the Doomsday was coming. Instinctively, they felt restlessly nervous. Everybody lifted up their heads to look at the Godlord and Ming Hao. They wanted to know what countermeasure the two most peerless experts in this world would suggest at this critical moment. In the next moment, their faces all grimaced. It was because the void above Hui was empty now. The Godlord and Ming Hao seemed to have disappeared into thin air. No one knew what had happened. They exchanged looks, their faces abnormal. Even DeCarlos was frowning. As people were gazing at him, he shook his head and said, Don't look at me. I don't know what's going on out there. I don't know how and why they disappeared. Pausing for a while, DeCarlos said, But at their realms, when they sense the magical power here, they will return quickly. You guys don't need to be so tense and nervous. He didn't have the answer. But someone could give the answer. Hui's mysterious power has affected the worlds that the Godlord and Ming Hao have created. It has delivered their arenas out of this area, said Shi Yin all of a sudden. Pondering, he knitted his brows. If I'm not wrong, the Godlord and Ming Hao are currently in the sea domain of nihility. I'm not sure if they can come back on time. Hearing him, everybody discolored in fear and screamed. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.